Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Tuesday, November 4th, 2025. So this is going to be an epic mega video. It's packed full of stuff. It's pretty long. It's like 3 hours long or more. So I'm going to put it up probably either tonight, Tuesday night, or tomorrow morning, Wednesday. And then Thursday afternoon or later, whenever I get that video done, I am going to cover the whole Erica Kirk interview. Also, Candace Owens giving a very weak explanation of why she won't shit on Erica Kirk. That's going to be great. And a few other things I already got cooking. Some TV USA stuff that's shows you that, well, they're just going after conspiracy theorists, truthers, in a way that's self-destructive. It's hilarious how bad they're doing. So I know I got those things coming, and then maybe some more things on Thursday. So either way, this will be up either Tuesday night or Wednesday. I won't make a video either Tuesday or Wednesday, depending which, because again, this is so long. I'm going to put this up tonight, Tuesday night, and then I'll skip Wednesday. You get the idea. So there'll be a day I skip, and that'll be Wednesday. But without further ado, here is this epic video. Okay, so Erica Kirk was on Good Morning, or was on Fox and Friends, and we'll get to that. I saw her dabbing her eyes. I really didn't see it yet. And I want to get to this interview that Candace Owens had with somebody Finkelstein. Howard Finkelstein? Johnny Finkelstein? Norman Finkelstein. I would have never guessed Norman. Norman's an odd name. And I have a few things, kind of some, I don't want to say big revelations there, but here's the thing. This is this huge, I don't know, in terms of the truth community, it's more than the truth community, right? And so we now know two things: that America and Americans will be completely complicit in a genocide, knowingly complicit, right? There were some genocides that happened before. I mean, there was tribes of Native American people that no longer exist. There's a lot of things that have gone on with America in terms of these wars and things. But the majority of people, I mean, some of them, not so much in the beginning, were not so much aware of it, right? People didn't have television. They didn't have, whatever kind of media and information exchange. They could be told anything. But now we know, all of us should know, and the people who at least are paying attention know that America was complicit in a genocide. It's something now like 95%, according to this guy, Howard Finkelstein, that 95% of Gaza was controlled demolition, all the buildings and houses being taken down, with IDF members taking videos of collapsing people's homes and laughing about it, right? And the other piece to this is Americans now know that the American government, despite promises by the candidate who's now president and at least his cronies, his son and his vice president and other people, who all declared that they would release the Epstein files, that the government would cover this up, even though more than 75% of people want the files released. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who's anti the files being released. There's people who don't know about it or people don't care about it, but there's no one like, oh, don't release those files, other than Trump and the other people who are guilty of these criminal acts. So we now know that the American government is still willing to cover up a huge sex scandal that has ruined many young women's lives, their families' lives, and, all the other things that went with it. This horrible guy, Jeffrey Epstein, and all the shit and the damage that he did, the connection to Israel and Mossad. And we also know that President Trump comes in, when he went to the Knesset and he licked taint for over an hour, said he gave Netanyahu every weapon he wanted. He said all these things about, how he was bought and sold and got all this money from Marian Edelson and all these things that he said that showed that he's completely owned by, he's an Israeli puppet. And we'll get more into that when we go through this Howard Finkelstein interview. So the powers that be, the people who are owned by Israel, and there's so many of them, and we'll go through this later on in the video. Some of the people we know who are owned by Israel, all these politicians. All these people have to sign this pledge. They all take money from Israel one way or another. All these social media people, all these actors and media people that are all owned by Israel. There's this saying way back in the day, I mean, I'm sure it's still a saying, that you can tell who your owners are by who you can't criticize. And so for a number of years, there was some debate about this. I mean, we don't know what we now know, right? Because Netanyahu has come out and said, we have to buy TikTok and we have to have these Zionist billionaires buy all these social media platforms, and we have to pressure all these people to say what we're telling them to say. In the interview with Normal Finkelstein, Candace Owens admit that she realized she was a slave to Israel. By the way, they pounded her when she gave them a slight bit of criticism. And Charlie Kirk was having that same realization, right? That these people realize they're slaves of Israel. And, the Israeli lobby, when you take millions of dollars, in Charlie Kirk's case, hundreds of millions of dollars from an organization, you're owned by them, right? And we've seen that Trump is owned by them. And he just went there to the Knesset and just, presented himself and said, do whatever you want to do with me, master. Like the fucking gimp in, in that Quentin Tarantino movie, Pulp Fiction, right? And so this is kind of a huge revelation because, people had their suspicions and everybody knew that Israel had some control over politicians. We all knew we couldn't criticize Israel and say certain things, that they were protected in various ways. And you would be called anti-Semitic and that you would be censored on social media and things if you criticized Israel and you said things that were true, that at least you knew were partially true, right? But what we didn't know was how far they could push it, right? We didn't know that if 70% and pretty much everybody wanted the Epstein files, if all the Americans were like, release the Epstein files, and all the Republicans were like, yeah, we're going to release the Epstein files just to elect Trump. And then Trump gets in there and they're like, oh, Epstein did kill himself and there's nothing in the Epstein files and we don't want to hurt innocent people, so we're not releasing them. And it was like a big fuck you to Americans. Like, holy shit, right? How much are you fucking owned by this guy? How much are you into this fucking... How many shekels have you taken, motherfucker? All these shekel-taking motherfuckers just said, no, we're not going to do it. And all the Democrats are pretending they wanted release, but they're also on board. They're just doing it to embarrass Trump. And so that was like a revelation. Like, that an issue that pretty much everybody's anti-pedophile. Pretty much everybody's anti-Jeffrey Epstein. And they were just like, fuck you, we're not releasing him. Tough shit. We promised, but we're not, And that shows you how much Israel fucking owns Trump and the government and the media that's even, hesitant to call this for what it is, right? But even worse than that, they just pummeled the city. That was, an area, a small area that's, that they don't have a military. It was like a total bullshit thing, using all this victim consciousness, all these things. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a whole video on Dave Smith debate with whatever that guy's name is, Josh Hammer. And, when they can't support, they can't debate the facts. You'll see this with all these shekel-taking shills. They always get into this using, like, what do you think about October 7th? And, all these things like that. Like, what do you think about the families and all those people? They won't debate the facts. They won't admit to what's going on. And so they just use this emotional manipulation, saying how disgusting everything is and how fucking dare you say such things, or they attack the person personally because they can't fucking debate the facts, right? Because they know that they're fucking a parasitic country. And it's such a parasitic country that they have so much control over everything because the American people, and they're just starting to figure out what's happening now, that you're slaves because, you now have people on both the right and the left who are aware of this genocide/ethnic cleansing, war crimes that's going on, that went on, the decimation of the Gaza Strip, and all the things that went into it. I mean, we only know a fraction of the abuse and the horrible things that have been done there, but we now know that America and the American politicians and the American people and the American media will, other than just giving some little bitch-ass complaints, making videos about, talking about it, won't do shit about that happening. Taking American money and doing something that hurts American interests globally and then in the Middle East, and we just got to eat it because all our politicians and media are owned by the Zionist fucks that have orchestrated this whole mess. And so we know it it's been confirmed. There's Netanyahu got out there at the Knesset and in these interviews and waved his little dick in everybody's face and said, "Fuck you, I own America, I own Trump, I own the politicians. We're going to own all the media. We already own most of the media. We all own the media, and we're going to own all the social media. We're going to get TikTok, and we're going to push the propaganda on you and fuck anybody who dares to stand up to us." And there'll be more censorship coming around the corner. We've seen this coming before. I'll talk about this later on. But I hope everyone can understand the significance of this because it's right in your fucking face right now. Trump getting up there and saying he feels bad for the royal fucking family. There's more blood on their hands than anybody. A long history of just fucking horrible behaviors by the king and queens of England and all the rest of these powerful people. They're just like, fuck you guys. We know you're upset. Just fucking take it. Just bend over and take it. And it's going to get fucking worse. Then they're going to collapse the economy. They're going to take away Social Security. They're going to do all these things. There'll be more shit with Israel. And they're just, people are going to be like outraged and going, somebody do something. Like fucking have some common decency. And they're just going to like, fuck you guys. Fuck you guys. Like this is going to be the time of fuck you. I talked about how this is the year of chaos. I think the next year will probably be the year of fuck you if I don't come up with something, something similar to that. But that's where we're going with it. They're just doing it right in your fucking face, right in front of you, sticking their fucking little dicks in your face and saying, you can't do shit about this. We're going to go ahead and fucking do all this shit. We're gonna support pedophiles. We're gonna fucking do genocides. We're gonna march the president up to the Knesset and let him just completely bow down before us like a fucking slave. We're gonna just make our politicians, all these people, go out and repeat these ridiculous fucking lies, and shamelessly do all this behavior, and we're just gonna show you we fucking own you. We fucking own you. You can't do shit about it. We'll stick our fucking vaccine needles in your arms and force all these things and all this bullshit, and you can't do shit about it. I mean, Israel and Zionists are a big part of this, but it's, the whole elitist type of attitude. Like you don't have rights. You don't have any of these things you thought you have. We're going to take your land. We're going to shove you in these little fucking Agenda 31 housing and all this shit that they're going to do. Because they know that American people don't have any resistance, don't have a plan, don't have a way to stop it, don't have a way to stand up to it, are completely captured, completely denutted, and can't do shit about it. Which I knew like 5-6 years ago. I was like, oh yeah, we're fucked. American people, we don't have anything. We don't have anything. We don't have a fucking, maybe boycotting. I don't even know if that would work. But that was about it. There's no, the American people are limp dick and can't do fucking shit. The people of the world are completely captured, completely controlled. And, it's just going to get worse with each generation. We get weaker and weaker, and people don't have a backbone. And even if they did, there's no leverage. They don't have any fucking leverage. And they don't have any choice. There's overpopulation. There's real fucking issues. There's shit's coming down the pipe. And they're just going to push it through and push these ridiculous narratives that nobody really buys into and just say, this is the truth. And if you don't like it, we're going to 1984 you and fucking, like that's what's up. It's right there in front of you. It's worse than fucking ever. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get into some of this stuff here. So it's an election day, November 4th on a Tuesday. This is when the video goes up. We'll get to Monica Erica Kirk in a moment, and then Norman Finkelstein, and then I made some video already that was going to be the beginning of this video, but now it'll be the end. And I got one epic comment I want to read that's going to be hilarious. This is going to be an epic video, at least as far as I can tell. For my next trick, I will make freedom-loving, small government conservatives defend a police state, justify debt, cheer for regime change, and turn a blind eye to the technocratic surveillance state. So, we've entered into the period of time where Joe Biden was so obviously fucked in the head. He was so obviously senile that the Democrats, we all saw it. At least, some of us saw it. I saw it. I don't know how you could not see it, but when Joe Biden was running for president, the first time against Kamala Harris and all those other dopes, he was clearly fucking gone mentally. He was, dementia. He had dementia. There was this great MSNBC interview with a doctor who specializes in Parkinson's, and he said that a first-year medical student should be able to diagnose Joe Biden with Parkinson's from across the room, or they would fail. They would, they wouldn't be good doctor material. I mean, he talked about all the different symptoms, and so Joe Biden was obviously breaking down, but they just ignored it. They hid him away during COVID. He didn't have to campaign, and then it just got more and more obvious. And there was a point where everybody who was, all the American people, 70% of the American people said that he was gone mentally. People were bailing on him. And there were some people still defending him and saying he was great. Kamala Harris amongst them. Now we've reached that point with Trump, even beyond that point. Trump has shown that he's completely owned by Israel. That Israel first, America second. Israel first, or Trump second, Trump first, I don't know. Tie for first. Trump is looking at like his relationship with Israel is putting himself first because of, all that they're doing for him, financially and other ways. And then America second. And so that should be, all the Trumpers need to see and know, but they are still, trust. If you're a Trumper, you're just, there's no respect, right, from anybody. It's embarrassing. And so, along those same lines, let's get to Erica Kirk here.
So Erica Kirk sat down for an exclusive interview. This is her first interview with the media since the assassination.
Wait, you guys are calling yourself media? Yeah, you're Fox News. So I haven't seen this yet. I saw her dab her eyes last night, but I didn't know what she was wearing. When I pulled this up, she was touching her maybe it was a preview picture. She was touching her eye with a Kleenex. That's her signature move. I didn't notice if she was wearing black and white. That's been her signature thing since Charlie's dead. But there's things to look for here. Well, let's just get into it.
Her husband, and we've all been wanting to hear from her because every time she speaks, it's so
she's
powerful.
Wearing green, she's
full and so emotional.
Look, there it is.
So she sat down with one of Charlie's really good friends, Jesse Waters. It's going to air in its entirety on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock during his show.
Okay, so we'll definitely be putting that out there.
But here's an emotional clip about how she's talking to her children about their daddy and his death.
She's just so fucking weird. She's got a very weird face, almost like a fake, could be a dude kind of thing. She's kind of big.
You told your children that Charlie was going on a work trip with Jesus. Are they still asking?
And then you told your daughter, she needs money because you're fucking beating us out of house and home with your blueberry habit, bitch. It's not my gaudy jewelry and my, desire for multiple homes and, all the stuff that I need. It's your blueberry habit. Your dad's got to go on a work trip with Jesus because we need that fucking martyr money.
Where's Daddy?
Yes, my daughter continues to ask, but it's really sweet because I keep explaining to her a few things. And I said, if ever you want to talk to Daddy, you just look up to the sky and start talking to him. He can hear you.
Just do it. You just go look up at the sky. You look up to the sky and Daddy's in the sky. He's right there in the firmament. You just click your heels 3 times and say firmament, firmament, firmament. And then there's Daddy. You go to the firmament and Daddy's there. He's there in the firmament. Oh my God, it's so fucking hard to cry. So is she going to do this forever? This is her thing. Fucking, how long is she going to grieve for? She's not doing this in real life. So before the Trump event where Charlie got the Medal of Freedom, whatever the fuck it was, she got out of the car smiling and laughing and talking to people. Light, not this, there's real grieving where you see people are wrecked. They can't even fucking walk. I've seen that. So there was a guy who was a preceptor, did the Sajmarg meditation. He was Indian. And him and his wife both lost their fathers. And, they were Indian people that were now living in America, younger than me. He was probably in his 30s. Well, I was in my 30s, so whatever it was. But, maybe around my age. And they had one son. And their son was like everything. He was a great student. He was doing well in America. and he was a teenager, like 16, 17. And I knew he was doing great because at his son's funeral, there was like I had to sign in, and there was some like kids, some American kids, who had written their names and messages and said, "You were the smartest guy I knew," right? So I knew that he was like, whatever he was. But they had lost their dads, and they weren't doing very well. Like they were struggling, and he was struggling. Maybe they were mad at God. His wife started to stop doing the Sajmarg meditation. Like they're all like, Indian people who live in India that have a much more, family centric, and there's a deeper attachment to their families than you see in America. That's, they're being westernized, but it's there. And then his son he went to the beach with his neighbor. His neighbor had like a couple of young toddler twins, and he was watching the toddlers, and his neighbor and his son went out swimming. This was in like Virginia Beach, where they have these riptides, and his son like dove into the water and never came back up. And he, so I go to the funeral, and his dad, this guy, they were two guys were holding him up on either side. He couldn't even stand, like he was like out of his body, fucked. He was wrecked. I've seen that. People who are just devastated by something. She was out performing and taking videos for social media a day after this guy died. Like, this is not that, right? So her prolonged grief, and this is just acting, where she's light and laughing and joking. When she gave the medal, when she showed the Medal of Freedom to all the people at TP USA, TP US Gay, right? She showed all that stuff. All the things that I've said.
It's always me, Robert. And I told her.
This is fake, it's like bad act. It's like bad soap opera acting. That's a soap opera face right there.
I said, Daddy is in heaven. She goes,
look at this asshole. Like, this is not the guy to be doing this. This guy's smug he's probably the most smug person. Like, he can be funny, but, like in a very smug way. But not somebody who's like, should be having a conversation with some bitch bad acting over here like she's grieving.
Do you think I could go sometime? I said, baby, we will all go one day.
How do you know? She's only a toddler. She's got plenty of years to fucking go south. We'll all go. Like, how do you know you're going to go? How do you know? Like, it's each person. How do you know they're going to accept Jesus? Look at this shit right here. Look at this stuff. The G is some sort of Freemasonic thing. And this other stuff here. But she likes this big-ass fucking jewelry with.
We will all go one day.
So often we talk about the ramifications.
We will all go one day? Oh, what do you mean? You and your family? Or like everybody will go to heaven? That's not the way it works, bitch. Right? It's a one-off. You get one shot, and most people would fail that shot. I mean, based on the official, like, I don't believe in the Christian bullshit thing. John 3:16, which I've talked about, which is like complete bullshit. But, come on, bro. Let's go to the normal Finkelstein thing. But she's just a fucking, I mean, it's bad. Like, how long can she carry this thing on? I want to see the whole interview. We're going to do it. We're going to, that'll be a thing for tomorrow when it comes out tomorrow. So it'll be a video on Thursday. But holy shit, you got to stop. It's just bad. Like, it's, at some point, like, you just got to stop fucking crying. At one point, like, she's going to have to, and it's all performative. So it's a decision. It isn't like she's crying for reals and one day she just stops. Like, and then going on these interviews. It's like remember when Alec Baldwin cried when he shot that woman on ABC News? It was totally fake and just bad acting. It's just, it's embarrassing and people can see through it. You have your fan base, but TP US Gay is like falling apart, right? It's imploding. And so, just wonderful here. Okay, this is Norman Finkelstein, and he said some very interesting things in this interview. I thought I would be able to watch just 10 minutes of it because of Candace Owens, her annoying stuff. And this guy, he talks like, it made it easier if you get to watch Kyle Dunnigan the comedian, he does an impression of Andrew Cuomo, who was running for mayor today, which is kind of interesting. But this guy sounds just like that impression. It's kind of hilarious. He talks with a very heavy New York accent. But this guy's story, well, according to Candace Owens, this is a guy who woke her up to Israel. Like, she started to look into his research. And so her story is that she was 100% pro-Israel. She's going to talk about how she was a slave to Israel, which, and basically Charlie Kirk was, which is interesting. So there's kind of some good revelations here about that stuff. But she was pro-Israel. She was on with Ben Shapiro. And when October 7th happened, she looked into it and found out she didn't know anything about Gaza. And through this guy's research and interview with him, which she wasn't allowed to do, she got fired for it or something like that, that she woke up to Gaza, and then they turned on her, and we'll go get into that in a bit. But this guy was, a hippie, liberal hippie in the, whatever it was, 60s, whatever. And he went to graduate school, and he was getting his PhD, and he wrote a paper about Gaza, and he debunked a book about one of these wars or whatever it was. One of the things, whatever, it's in the thing. And he debunked it, and it was a very popular book among all these scholars, and he was blacklisted. And he received a PhD, but he never was a tenured professor. And he talks about this here. Let's play a little bit of this here. So he had no career. And again, he is a Holocaust survivor. So somebody he lives in an all-Jewish neighborhood. He's very, he acts very Jewish. And yet the powers that be, and the pro-Israeli Zionist powers that be, made it so he had no career.
Just whatsoever in invoking pity. It's water under the bridge. I never had an academic career. I was in academia, it's called being an adjunct. And an adjunct basically means you're hired from semester to semester. It's literally the equivalent of a substitute teacher in a public school system, except a substitute teacher is paid significantly more than an
So he was a guy with a published author. He had a book that only sold 350 copies, and he bought half of them on Gaza, right? So this guy was, published, guy who should have been he's obviously really smart and well-known and famous. He's somebody who's famous in the truth about Israel type of way. And he was relegated to being a substitute teacher on the professorial level, right?
adjunct. And I was never able to get beyond the adjunct status except one brief period at DePaul University in Chicago, where by a concatenation of events, I managed to get on a tenure track job. But when the moment of truth came, I was denied tenure. And after that, because it was a kind of national story, when I was denied tenure, because Professor Alan Dershowitz of Harvard University Law School made a determined public attempt to stop me. There was a big editorial in the Wall Street Journal by him.
So you guys know who Alan Dershowitz is. He's one of these pro-Israel. He's a guy who was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He was Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. He was Trump's lawyer. He's been he was a lawyer for, I believe, Al Gore, or I think Al Gore, when the Bush election, he was the professor, the guy in charge of Harvard Law School, right? And so he's like a complete shill, one of these Zionist piece of shit, Jeffrey Epstein motherfuckers. And he was implicated with Jeffrey Epstein. And that guy, she would later say about Harvard, well, I think I'll get into that later. Hopefully I'll remember. Well, let me say it here, and it will come back up. And she says, what does it say about America at Harvard that this guy, Henry, whatever his name is, Finkelstein, Howard Finkelstein, is it? We'll see it again here. Norman Finkelstein. Norman. She says, what does it say about America that this guy can't be a tenured professor, but they had a sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender, as one of their people on their, he had a position at Harvard, right? Jeffrey Epstein had a position of Harvard, and this guy is blacklisted and blackballed. And so, it's also cannibalistic because this guy is, I'm definitely a Jewish person, a very Jewish person. And they have just, went after him, at least destroyed his professional career. And yet he's famous. Like, people won't debate him. Like, he's a known person. He's like one of these people who's famous, but, I don't know where he gets his money. And, he's probably not destitute, but he had not the career that he should have had, right? He should have been a celebrated professor at one of these big Ivy League schools. He was a great researcher, and he was a part of the hippie liberal movement, which has taken over academia. Those hippies have grown up and taken over all these colleges. You think so, because they get into how Harvard's completely owned by these Zionist pigs or whatever it is.
He made a very public attempt to stop me. After that was 2008, 2007. After that, I was completely unemployed, not even adjunct. After that, actually, I know this will come as it will seem kind of unbelievable. I literally couldn't volunteer to teach. There were places where, in high schools, a charter school, for example, in East Harlem, where the father of the principal was a friend of mine. And his daughter, the principal, who was really wonderful, and she ran a tight ship. That was a darn good school. You could see just walking through the hallways. I said, I'll volunteer. No. So at that point, after the pool...
So that's how bad they fucked this guy. I mean, they didn't kill him, but they destroyed his academic career because he was a college student and wrote a truthful, debunking of many of the myths and bullshit behind Gaza. And he talks about how he lists all these people, famous people who had positions, even people who had positions in Israel, that talk about Gaza being a concentration camp, the biggest concentration camp in history. It's a 28-mile by 5-mile strip of land that was owned was controlled at first by Egypt and then by Israel. So there's that part. So I'm not sure if I have it here, but if I do, I'll show it to you. But at some point, he talks about how that the guys who grow up in the IDF and the people that grow up in Israel, they think that the people of Gaza are vermin. And like they celebrate killing their children, like they hate them. They're just like rats, right? But this part, I think, is... Well, let's watch this part here.
In 2006, Israel imposes a blockade on Gaza. It decides what goes in. It decides what goes out. It decides who goes in. It decides who goes out. They put Gaza on what they call...
So my dogs have been totally barky and very reactive since the pig incident. You guys saw the video where a pig just showed up in my yard. And the pig is, it's only slightly bigger than them, but he's been really rattled. But Tulsi went up and was basically chasing the pig after, she established whatever. But they've been like, any little noise or anything, they've just been going off.
Planetarian minimum diet. You know what that meant? It meant they calculated, literally, we're not talking about hyperbole now, poetry. They calculated the caloric diet of everyone living in Gaza, and they admitted just enough food to avoid scenes of starvation. That was 2006. We're not talking about after October 7. They prohibited baby chicks from going into Gaza. They prohibited chocolate from going into Gaza. They prohibited potato chips from going into Gaza. They prohibited condiments from going into Gaza. No cinnamon allowed in Gaza. Why? They wanted to create such intolerable conditions that the population of Gaza would overthrow the government that they elected. So that was Gaza. Now,
So, he gets into some of these things. I mean, the details. But, I mean, how sick is that, right? Like, that's just so fucking cold-blooded. War is one thing and bombing is another. But, to starve the children, the people there, to look at it like, well, we're going to make things as miserable as possible. And so, whatever reasons there are, like, that's his reason. And people will say this guy's a shill or whatever, and, whatever. I mean, everybody's a shill or not, but, or controlled opposition. But the information that he has here, it paints Israel way worse than, anybody else I've heard. Their relationship with Gaza and all these things. I mean, it's pretty brutal. I'm not going to cover this whole video, but it's, if you don't know much about this, and I guess the guy's written multiple books on the subject, he's just giving like small details. It paints a picture of, there's no way that they could ever, and I mean, the body count, I've talked about that personally, here in some of my videos. There's 200,000 dead Palestinians, millions dead, now, but, over the years. I mean, they don't have a way to figure out the amount of Palestinian deaths. But Israel's it's like 1,000 dead Palestinians to every one dead Israeli. Like, that's how. And, the Israeli stuff is questionable, right? Inflated and maybe a false flag thing. So, I mean, there's just no comparison here, right?
you come to 2006, October 6th, okay? You come to 2006. The Economist magazine, which is not a flaming liberal magazine, it describes Gaza as, quote, a human rubbish heap. The leading UN official on Gaza describes it as, quote, a toxic dump. 60% of the young people in Gaza, the people who burst the gates of Gaza on October 7th, 60% of them are unemployed. All they have to look forward to when they get up each morning is to pace the perimeter of this tiny parcel of land, 26 miles long, the length of a marathon, 5 miles wide. That was Gaza. It was exactly what the UN officials said, exactly what Al Gore's father said, exactly what the head of the Israeli National Security Council said. They were born into, they languished in, and they were destined to die in a concentration camp.
So this is significant. This guy's parents were in Auschwitz. And they get into the people who faked. There's a lot of fakers out there that pretended to be survivors of concentration camps of the Holocaust. And they faked it, right? They used it as a weapon. But his parents used to call bullshit on these people. Like, I don't know if I'm going to show you the clips of that, but that's coming up. If I do, if not, I'll talk about it maybe a little bit at the end of this thing here, right? But, this is a guy whose family suffered. It's a big part of his whole existence, right? And he's saying Israel's doing the same thing to these Palestinian people, right? So this whole idea of the Holocaust, I've talked about abuse before. That, I worked as a counselor with teenage sex offenders and kids who work at in another treatment center. I worked in the milieu before I had my master's degree in counseling. And, when you have trauma, and I wrote a whole workbook on this, right? But when you're traumatized by something, when you experience abuse, you experience something traumatic. And if something has happened to you, like now you have an abuser inside of you as a reference point. Like someone has modeled abuse as a way of being in the world. So everybody experiences like bullies and people like that. Everyone has a bully inside of them, right? Everybody has that as an option. And then also you've experienced victimness, being a victim. And every abuser is a victim, and every victim's an abuser. And so you now have that. It's like a program. It's like a computer virus you now have inside of you, like deviant behaviors that have been, you've witnessed. And I'm even watching shit on TV and these other things. It's like you've recorded that, and that exists as part of your internal creation. I always talk about people's internal worlds in my, various whatever it is, like videos, books and things like this. Internal world is like everything. Like, what are you inside? And so if you experience trauma and abuse, there's three options. You can cope, which is somehow you have to transform the abuse. I wrote a workbook about transforming abuse. And, it's kind of got some good stuff in it, but I have to rewrite it, and it's just never going to happen. But I can talk about some of the things. And I do talk about some of the things here. But you have to transform that abuse. The other options is you hurt somebody else, you pass on, you become the abuser, or you embrace the victim consciousness and you continuously hurt yourself, right? You have an internal abuser who's beating the shit out of you, and you end up cutting and doing these things, right? Or physically, or you do things to self-sabotage. So you have this poison, this venom, this negative thing now inside of you, and you have to deal with it. And most people just don't, and they don't cope. And so if you're going to whine and be a victim, and always, not take responsibility for that, things happen for a reason, that God has a plan. So everything that happens to you comes from God. And so you have to process it and figure out what it means, and ultimately be grateful for it, right? And so, there's that part. But, there's a lot of, like, Holocaust stuff. There's, like, probably 3-4 movies a year, TV shows, about the Holocaust and Nazism and Nazis. It's a very repetitive, we'll never forget. But this guy, his parents died, or his parents were survivors of the Holocaust, and everybody in their family, their sisters, brothers, siblings, parents, cousins, everyone they knew was killed. Very few people. He talks about how the Germans were very, efficient people, and they efficiently exterminated all these people, right? And so, again, there's people talk about numbers, and there's different stories about it. But from his perspective and his story, his parents survived, and everyone else they knew was dead, right? And so, if something like that happens, and it becomes a defining talking point for a group of people, you can't go and repeat it and do it to another group of people like they're doing to the Palestinians, because you lose all credibility, as a victim, right? Like if you're perpetrating a Holocaust on the Palestinian people of Gaza and, the West Bank, but more Gaza, then, you have nothing to say, because you are the monster that you claim to be, victimized by, right? And so that's happened here. The other thing is that this guy's probably in his 70s. Anybody born in 1950, at least people that came over to America from Holocaust survivors, they're all dead. The World War II people, the greatest generation's dead. And so you just have people like him who, he was affected by these Holocaust survivors, right? But like his, in 10, 15 years, all the children of Holocaust survivors are done. And so it gets to be a point where it's no longer, it's just as much as they indoctrinate the American kids, they teach this in the school system, it's no longer a big deal, right? It's, it's generationally a thing of the past, right?
It was like an elephant burial ground, really. And when I struggled after October 7th, I've said this many times, but it's a fact. It's not a drama point. What happened October 7th?
So he gets into the thing that you got to understand, like, these people, like, and I've said this before, you they like to characterize these people as villains, the so-called terrorists, right? But if you beat the shit out of these people and victimize them, take away their livelihoods, their lives, they're in horrific situations, and you're dominating them and bullying them. I don't mean just in Gaza. I mean anywhere in the Middle East, any of these countries that are, Americans come in with the military and they're bullying people. And then they start reacting. They're not insurgents. They're not terrorists. They're, people who are being bullied, who are, expressing some of the hostility that's coming towards them back at the people that are committing these crimes, right? These, international crimes of war that no one gets punished for.
Publications that have been documenting everything. Obviously, he's not well liked by the people in Israel. They were taking to the streets to protest him, but it is almost unbelievable that circumstance. Plus, when you add to the fact they intercepted a document, right, way earlier that said 200 hostages were going to be taken by Hamas. It's almost unbelievable that they ignored everything, plus Egypt warning them that something was happening on the border. I have never bought that there was not that it took place. Of course it took place and it was terrible, but that it wasn't intentionally allowed. And I truly believe that in my soul after I saw the footage prior to October 7th of Bibi Netanyahu. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but he thinks he's off record. He says, put the cameras down, like off record. And he starts detailing a plan where he's like, we got to hit Gaza so hard that they can't go back. And so they sort of needed a pretext of sorts. And do I think
she's talking about a false flag thing here? Dave Smith in his debates, I showed you a clip of him, and he talks about how Haaretz and some of these other Israeli publications, that's a liberal one, but there's some, Times of Israel that have talked about how Netanyahu and his cronies were propping up Hamas financially. Even when there was a blockade, they were still bringing in money to Hamas. Like Hamas was still getting propped up because their idea, what Netanyahu said, was they'll never make a two-state solution as long as Hamas is in control of Gaza. And so, there's no way this would happen. This guy says something here.
Bibi Netanyahu is evil enough to sacrifice his own people? Yes, 1,000,000 times over. What's been happening in Gaza is a tremendous evil. And I don't think we will truly know the full picture of how evil it was until Bibi Netanyahu is removed from power and we're able to see the transcripts that he's blocking of the conversations he had that day with his cabinet.
Look, there are areas of interpretation here. And I don't want to pretend as if I have a monopoly in the truth. If you look back at 9/11, okay, our own September 11th, if you look back, and there were many people who wrote at the time, there were a lot of people in the national security establishment who had reports that there was going to be an attack. They came in, the reports came in, no question about that.
Okay, so they talk at some point about how he said the Israelis were so arrogant. Well, he says it here maybe.
You have to remember, when you are a state the size of the United States and the power of the United States, you're going to be getting each day 10,000 intelligence reports about possible terrorist attack here, possible terrorist attack there. The United States has a huge number of bases around the world. Mm-hmm. So you're always getting reports. But a intelligence establishment has to rank threats. Mm. And they ranked the Osama bin Laden threat low or lower than it should have been.
We all know this is, false flag, right?
Ranked. In the case of Israel, here we're free to disagree. Israel it's a Jewish supremacist state. That's not my...
So his word is, Jewish supremacist is his word for Zionist, and he uses it quite often. That Jewish supremacists are controlling Gaza in this region. And he talks about all these Jewish supremacists in America, billionaire Jewish supremacists that have bought all these, media outlets and universities and all these things, controlling America, which they talk about. I think I have some of that later on.
The opinion, okay? So the head of Israel's main human rights organization, it's called B'Tselem, B'Tselem. And the head of Israel's human rights, B'Tselem, this is a few years ago, it's a guy named Haggai Elad. Very decent guy. I've never met him. I'm not sure if he ever wanted to meet me. But decent guy. He was a Harvard-trained PhD in physics. Serious fellow. Okay? And he put out a little report, or he was the executive director when B'Tselem put out a report. It was probably 10, 15 years ago now. 10. My memory's bad for time now. And he said, here are the basic facts. There's one state from the Mediterranean to the Jordan.
Okay, I'm just going to, this guy's kind of long-winded. What he ends up saying is that the report came out that they're going to do this October 7th thing. And Israeli people said, well, we own you guys and we have complete control of the borders. And they laughed at it. And so, that was his maybe point of them being arrogant and not, but him even saying it, the control, it's a very small border. It's not like the border between Texas and Mexico or the whole southern border or our border with Canada. It's a small portion of this 28-mile long region, right? And they have it completely controlled. And, they have a superior military. So, whether this is a legitimate event or false flag, and I can't imagine how it's legitimate, it's either way, it's, they would have to let it happen. They would have to, like the stuff that happened in January 6th, where they let those fucktards into the Capitol Hill, the Capitol, with FBI informants, 28 FBI informants leading the way, that kind of thing. It has to be controlled. It has to be staged in some way. Okay, so before moving forward with this happened. They discussed this.
Iran and Qatar have come up with a disinformation.
So they talk about how he's wearing this yellow ribbon as support for Israel and to do with Gaza. Van Jones. Now he's a liberal, and the liberals are, let's go back here to that. The liberals are, anti-Israel, but he's not. And he's on with Bill Maher. And he talks about, Norman Finkelstein talks about how he lives in such a Jewish neighborhood. There's synagogues everywhere as you walk through the streets, like in a very Jewish, I assume, New York neighborhood, where it's all Jewish people. And he said he didn't see one person wearing a yellow ribbon. 60% of Jewish people think that what's happening in Gaza is a war crime, that it's a genocide, 40%. These are American Jewish people, right? So, who aren't indoctrinated by the stuff from Israel. But Van Jones is wearing this ribbon because he's gotten so much money. He got like $100 million from Jeff Bezos and, all these things. Like he's been, captured. And they talk about how when they're laughing with him when he says this thing, they're also laughing at him because he's their slave, right? He's talking about him and Candace Owens are talking about these two people that are with him. One of them's Bill Maher.
Have come up with.
There we go, right here.
To divide Americans over the war in Gaza. Let's watch.
Iran and Qatar have come up with a disinformation campaign that they are running through TikTok and Instagram that is massive. If you are a young person, you open up your phone and all you see is dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, right. Diddy, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby.
And they're laughing, right? They're laughing. He's talking about dead Gaza babies. And, Norman Finkelstein said there's, 50% of the people in Gaza are kids. And there are at least 20,000 bare minimum by, the bare minimum estimation. But there might be as many as 300,000 dead kids, even if there's 10 or 1 dead babies, and that they were celebrating on social media when they would kill Gaza kids because these IDF people are trained that these people are less than vermin, right? This is their whole thing. There's like an indoctrination that goes. And so, so they're talking about how he's their slave because he's taking money. He's doing this, getting money. He's sheckled, right? He's getting all the shekels. They talk about Trump being a slave of Israel, right, because of the whole thing, which we know.
Bashed over the weekend for those comments, and on Sunday he issued a formal apology. Writing an X quote, "I made a comment on Real Time with Bill Maher about the war in Gaza that was insensitive and hurtful. I apologize. Suffering of the people of Gaza, especially the children, is not a punchline. I'm deeply sorry it came across that way. What's happening to
It's
children
totally, what do you mean? It didn't come across that way. It was the punchline.
in Gaza is heartbreaking." He goes on, "As a father, I can't begin to imagine the pain their parents are enduring, unable to protect their kids from unimaginable harm. I'm praying and working for an immediate end to this war and for peace and for safety for every family caught in its path. I'm truly sorry for the pain my words caused to people who are already suffering more than anyone."
Okay, so it's important to know that. Let's go back to the other thing here.
I live in an old Jewish neighborhood in Ocean Parkway, Brooklyn. There's literally a synagogue in every block. In some blocks, there are 2 synagogues. You walk up and down Ocean Parkway, it's all Jewish. I don't see anyone wearing a yellow ribbon. I know,
No, I know.
I don't see anyone wearing a yellow ribbon. Why is Van Jones advertising the flag? He's just advertising, I'm a slave.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
He used to brand slaves.
And he's just a slave. And
this is how I feel when I see people in Congress. I mean, think about a presidential
slaves.
debate wearing a flag pin from a flag that is it's not American. It's like you're just a slave.
And he's wearing the yellow ribbon here. If there were any what you call truth in advertising, he would wear a dollar sign here, a dollar gold pin over.
Or a shekel. It's symbol for a shekel, showing that he's shackled and shackled and shackled. They're all shackled, right? So, right. So that's the first piece. Okay, so let me just add something here. I'm editing. So there is, as I said before, there is a pathway to Jew hate because it's happened over and over again, right? So whatever that reason is, like people can incarnate as various races, various people over various time periods. Like I'm pretty sure I had Native American past lives. I probably had some European past lives. I might have been incarnated around Jesus. I definitely had Indian past lives in India. The Native American India particularly, I'm sure of. At least in terms of something that I know personally, not that I can prove. But you have, also incarnation as a woman, these things, right? You have these different things. Like you're not going to be the same person every time. If reincarnation is real, which I'm 100% sure it is, I don't care what you think. You've got your own problems. But it's not going to be the same thing. And you could be different forms of life. You could be an animal. You could be, on a different planet with some other kind of intelligent life. I mean, your soul has all these possibilities, just like a video game avatar. Think about all the avatars you've had in video games. And you've been these various people. And so, people play video games. So, it doesn't matter what people think in terms of their personal prejudice now if their soul has been incarnated as these various people. And so it's something to think about. But in terms of Jewish people, and, most of the interactions I've had with Jewish people have been great. Like I had friends growing up in an area where there's a lot of Jewish people. 40% of my town was Jewish people. And I had kids that I hung out with, best friends when I was a kid, Jewish, best friends. My dad was Italian, Sicilian, really Sicilian-looking guy. Went to college when, the 1920s and 30s where Italians were looked down on, and his 2 best friends were Jews who were also looked down on, right? And he had these lifelong friends, Bob Satter and Harold Wurtenberg. So, I don't have any kind of animosity. One of my basketball buddies who still contacts me is Jewish. And, I don't think he really goes to the synagogue or anything like that, but he was, that's his ethnicity. And the guy who was a preceptor, one of my 5 favorite people, Fred, my preceptor, was Jewish, right? So I don't, I'm not some anti-Jew person who has some kind of thing. I think anybody can see that. And so I'm not talking about this as a personal, whatever. It's just something that exists where countries hate Jews and turn on them. And it's, one of the big talking points. It's acknowledged by Jewish people because they need a homeland because they're in these other countries where they're an ethnic minority. And eventually the people turn on them, right? And like I said this in an earlier video, this is historical. And it's happening again. Like it's happening right now. And I don't see how this ends without that happening. Where every Jewish person is then lumped in with these assholes like Netanyahu. And this is what's going to happen. Because I don't see what pathway is there to avoid this after what they just did and the arrogance that's coming out. Just like people are going to hate Americans. Like people love American dollars now. And when you go traveling, people have, in the most part, are pretty positive towards Americans, at least economically. They want your American tourist dollars. Whether they feel about Americans, whether they'll tell you to your face or whether they, whatever it is. But when shit goes down and America and Israel wreck the world, then you're going to see this all, you'll see a turn and everyone's going to hate Americans and hate Jewish people. I mean, that seems like just like the path that we are on that's unavoidable. Okay. So Candace Owens then gets into her realization that she was a slave to Israel.
In the end, and I released the text message chain 48 hours before he died, where he said, "They've left me no choice but to abandon the pro-Israel cause." And I really think that the best person that put it very plainly, like if you lost Charlie Kirk, who was actually so committed to Israel for him as he started evangelical.
Yeah, because he was the most shekel person. I mean, again, another $100 million guy. Right? They're giving hundred millions of dollars away. Like fucking, very few people can turn down $100 million when all you have to do is say something that, you really can't say the opposite. You can't criticize Israel. So all you have to do is lavish support on them. I mean, you're betraying your country and your religion and yourself and all this other stuff and the humanity and God, right? I mean, it's a lot of shekels. It's a lot of, 30 pieces of silver. It's a lot of Judas shit there. I mean, that's why I said Charlie Kirk was a Judas. But, it's hard to turn down $100 million. Like, I can fully understand, if you can't, and you can't fix things. I don't know about these people. Like, I don't know what their actual belief is and how cynical they are and how much they know. But when you can't fix things, or if you think you need money and you just need to make a deal with the devil for a little bit so that your program can get up and you can, whatever people think, right? I mean, TPUSK wasn't going to do shit, right? But, $100 million is a lot of money. And if the alternative is they ruin you or they kill you and your family or whatever it is, right? Like if you have those two options, I can understand why people take them. Like I'm not going to, blame people for taking them, given that we can't fix the system. Like I say this all the time, I don't care about any of this stuff. Like it's between each person and God. Each person has to play their role for God, and some people are playing villainous roles. That's just the way it is. Some people are supposed to be a villain in this life, in the divine drama. So like that's between them and God. But, you can't fix the system. So, whatever, right? That is like whatever it is. But still, it's pretty greasy, right? It's pretty fucked.
Evangelical Christian, and then he couldn't unsee, and he said explicitly in his message, because of Jewish behavior. And we know what he meant. He didn't mean all Jews in America. It's like that power that we are talking about that happens, and the way they were treating him as if suddenly he woke up and realized, like I did, oh, I thought that you guys were supporting me because you were my friends. I thought you supported me because I will pursue the facts. I thought you supported me because you want me to have a platform because I will speak truth to power. And then when you turned around and realized, well, wow, I was just a slave to you. You view me as something other. And
well, why would you not know that? Like, why would you think that anybody would support all the things you just said? She said that when they're talking about BLM, Black Lives Matter, she was getting so much praise from these Zionist billionaires people. Like they were just loving her. The whole thing with Ben Shapiro and all these other people. And then she looked into Gaza and then had a different opinion, and they said you're an anti-Semite, and you're a worthless piece of shit, right? And she's like, oh, I'm a slave. I didn't know, Charlie Kirk, I'm a slave. But why wouldn't you know that already? Like, that's the silly part. But, to her credit, we'll get into this in a bit.
And for Charlie, I think he was realizing at the end, or maybe he never understood it, that if you take the king's shilling, you fight the king's war.
Shekels. It's not shilling, shekels.
Well, there's a proverb. I'm not familiar with that proverb, but there's he who pays the piper calls the tune.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do when you have a not-for-profit 501c3 that has taken millions of dollars? And Bob Shillman was one person who took $2 million away from him instantly if he didn't, start peddling the correct talking points about Israel. And he was just done in the end. Mm-hmm. And then, he died. So
that's weird. Coincidence. What a coincidence. Well, the two things aren't connected.
It was no longer a problem, but they then rushed to misrepresent and to pretend that period didn't happen. He literally told Bibi Netanyahu on the phone, no, because they were panicked about losing Charlie. He calls and invites him to Israel, and Charlie said no. And yet Bibi then rushed to lie.
Okay, so we know all this story, right? But her realizing she's a slave. There's something else here I want to talk about. The positive things that Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson brought, like despite there being disinformation agents or whatever the fuck they are. So you have to evaluate the effects in the show. Let me go to this other piece here. So they get into this stuff here.
He said when ICE puts on the masks, you know what he said? I'm quoting him word for word. These are cowardly desperados acting like the Ku Klux Klan. That's the words he used. Who was behind this assault on our freedom of speech?
The Trump administration.
No, the Trump administration, you could say broadly, but on the specific issue of the encampments and Israel and Palestine, that was the Jewish billionaire class.
The Trump administration. Yeah. So we're in radical agreement.
But remember, it began under Biden.
Yeah, I'm talking about when he actually Mahmoud Khalil, because I followed that case,
right? And
because I believed in Trump and I voted for Trump, and
I agree with that part.
They got up there and they pretended he was some terrorist and they lied, and I'm like, but he wasn't, and we were the ones that said that we would fight for free speech.
He was actually the mediator at Columbia. He was the mediator.
I followed it. Yeah,
So,
okay, so they get into this stuff with what was I going to say? Well, let's go back to what I was going to say about Candace Owens first. So Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, I have mixed feelings about them. It's not, it doesn't matter. Like I said, nobody's going to save the country. I don't care if people shekel up. I don't care about any of this stuff. But I mean, spiritually, if people make the right decisions for themselves materially, or at least the ones that, make sense for their egos, people will make a deal with the devil on a material level and don't think about their soul. And, people who have an internal relationship with God. And I think Candace Owens is somebody who is, maybe, just from the things that she says and their stories that seem somewhat credible and believable, might be someone who's got some true spiritual seeker in her, maybe on a very, I don't want to say immature level, something that's just coming to the surface. Or maybe, I don't know how old she is or what her thing is. But, till I was 29 years old, I was a worthless piece of shit. Right? I don't think underachieving, all these things. So, I think about that with my kids and then, children, all these people. Children suck and teenagers suck, but, we all went through our own things before we had our, waking up moment, epiphany moments. And for me, fighting the Sizemore system was transformational. I think I covered that in a voiceover at the end of this thing. I'll put that voiceover there. I think I talk about it there. I might talk about it in the beginning. But either way, I was a worthless piece of shit who was, gifted the wonderful experience of connecting to God through the Sizemore system, which is a facilitator of that contact. And so when you have a connection to your heart and God, then, you can feel how bad a decision is. And you have an advantage that other people don't have. And I don't take that for granted. When I'm talking about these other people, it's something that I have that they don't. Which is, I certainly didn't deserve it from what I did up into that point in this life, but in previous lives or whatever it was that, allowed, and whatever my, soul plan was, whatever that was happening. But in terms of the truth community and these people and whatever they are, Tucker Carlson, whatever she is, Candace Owens, they have allowed for the other people talking about Israel. Like them going out and talking about Israel and making it okay. I think Tucker Carlson even more so, but both of them. And, you weren't able to do that before. And it's created an awareness of things. My wife didn't know anything about this, and she's done a lot of truther research because people just wouldn't talk about it. Like there's people who talked about it, and they were always being, either totally shadow banned or removed. And then there's all the, people just hate Jews, and it's a whole different thing. They hate all Jews. It's a whole, that's they're just like a nightmare group that wrecks it for everybody because they just I didn't want those people on my channel. And so, it's a very slippery issue. And, the information wasn't out, and the thing in Gaza hadn't happened, and Trump getting up at the Knesset and all these things that I talked about in the introduction. But they've allowed for that to happen. And there was some personal transformation more on Candace Owens' part, where now she's talking about at some point that hopefully I have that part here. Maybe she says it here. Let me see.
It's a wholesale assault on freedom of speech in our society, and it was led by these people, the same billionaire class.
That cut checks. And this is the problem when you take the money, which I say you fight the king's wars. How did Trump get into office? Who cut him the checks? Who cut him a $100 million check? Miriam Adelson. And so the presidency can be bought, okay? There's no question.
Yes, I think.
As all things in America, there is a certain level where you can outright purchase influence. And it's hard for us to recognize that. And I had to really come to terms with that. This has been hard for me as someone who has been a vocal supporter of Trump, truly believed that he sort of beat the billionaire class to get into office, to see him so radically in this term specifically shift on.
There's enough in the first term.
His perspectives of speech. I actually feel watching him pains me to see this administration play Twister to explain, while we're free speech, but this is different. These are Hamas supporters, all of these psychological games. And, you're not instantly a Hamas supporter if you have questions about what's going on over there. And by the way, they also gaslight us where they're like, then they get to you're obsessed with us. It's like, no, you guys were the ones that insisted that we all have a perspective on October 7th. And so when some of us actually said, okay, well, let me get educated because maybe let me roll my sleeves up and be radically pro-Israel. Then when we looked and we pierced that veil, we went, oh my goodness, how was I ever pro-Israel? And now you want us to shut up. Now you want our influence gone. Now you want to smear us as anti-Semites and Hamas supporters. And it really is telling.
Well, there are two aspects.
Okay, so at some point she says that she's done with both parties or whatever. So she's coming to the left-right paradigm. And, regardless of whether she's a shill or not, whatever the thing is, and she certainly was a shill because she admits to taking Israeli money and whatever support she was getting and, being a slave to these guys. But she's now verbalizing that. So you have to, words are just words, but certainly she's suffered some kind of whatever, maybe you could say it's performative, but it seems like she's suffered some whatever. They always like to have disinformation agents. And so there's that. Like you can believe what you want to believe about her. You can believe her story or not or whatever it is. But there is value in what they've done for the truth community because now people are, bailing on Trump because of her and other people. People on Charlie Kirk, people are questioning whether Israel got him. They know, they're bailing on Turning Point, and that's significant. And these other people are, there's people who are aware of this stuff. And so, in terms of truth, information, and the ability to talk about such things, eventually they're going to close that shit down. they'll find a way, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So in that, they serve some kind of a purpose. So the other thing I want to talk about is they talked about Harvard. And this guy talked about how Harvard was bought and sold by these Israeli Zionist billionaires, right? The same people that were propping up Charlie Kirk. But when they had a problem with the kids protesting against Gaza, the administration, they wouldn't hire any professors that were pro-Palestinian. I mean, they were completely indoctrinated, all these companies. They talk about this woman who's some dope who runs CBS, and she's really stupid, but she's grown up in it. And how he reads something about what she said that shows you that these people believe that everyone else is goy, that all these people, he gets into that whole thing. But him speaking out as a Jewish person makes it better. Like, you have to, this is allowed for free flow of information that wasn't there before. This has been opened up, and because it's so obvious to everybody now, and these young kids are getting, college kids and people are getting a big dose of this, and this is for them their waking up moment, and that could have some positive effects later on a society that's crumbling, but at least the truth is emerging. That's all we can hope for. That's why I've said over and over again, that the truth comes out to whatever capacity. The negative truth, hopefully it leads people to realize that all this money and power and politics and celebrity and fame and all this shit is bullshit. It means nothing. It doesn't make you happy. And there's a spiritual purpose, and you have to have a spiritual purpose. And if that will accelerate that, I talk about it all the time, and, I don't think it has much of an effect for most people. There are some of you who are at that point. I don't know if Candace Owens is legitimately at that point, where you start seeking a spiritual solution. And if you do that, if you wake up to that extent where you realize this is all just an illusion, it's Maya. It's just a simulation. And you have a soul's purpose, and you're just being distracted by all the bullshit that exists in American culture or world culture, human culture, and all the things that are there just to pull you away from your soul's path. So I think this is what he's saying about the redefinition of anti-Semitism, which was kind of hilarious and kind of twisted.
For the purposes of this report, we are going to define anti-Semitism.
Okay, so he said that Harvard put out a 350-page report about the anti-Semitism that's running rampant in America. And this is the report that was used over and over again to talk about anti-Semitism just overwhelming our universities and things like this, right? And he said he found no anti-Semitism by what anybody would consider a reasonable definition. But then he gives this definition here.
As any time Jewish students, in particular, they said, Israeli Jewish students, every time they feel that they're being excluded in the classroom or being excluded in extracurricular activities or they're being excluded in social life, that's going to be the definition of anti-Semitism.
So they wrote this report, Harvard did, and that was the definition of anti-Semitism. If you're Jewish, especially Israeli Jewish, and you feel you're being excluded, then those people are being anti-Semitic. Like fucking, this is how bad it's gotten, right? This is how much they own fucking, this is, the top university, Harvard University. This is how much they own these academic institutions and the politicians and the media, that they would, and academia, that they would let that shit pass, right?
Well, what does that mean de facto? So there are all these Israelis who are coming over to Harvard after serving in Gaza, right? And you are commanded now by Harvard, in the name of what they call inclusiveness and pluralism, you have to pal around with them. And if you don't pal around with them, you're an anti-Semite. That's literally, I am not exaggerating a jot.
If you don't want to be friends with murderers,
exactly,
you're an anti-Semite.
If you don't,
if that's the new definition,
right, if you don't want to,
maybe I've been an anti-Semite my whole life.
Right,
I guess what they're saying.
If you don't want to hang around with child killers,
yeah,
you're an anti-Semite. If you don't like
Jeffrey Epstein, if you don't like Jeffrey Epstein, you're an anti-Semite. If you don't like people that abuse children, also, I get what we're doing off definition. Yeah. Okay,
yeah, so it's essentially a command coming from the top down that we have to normalize child killers. We have to say, okay, Candace is, when she applied to Harvard.
That's how he says her name. So I was Candace. Like, how could you not pronounce Candace? You live in he's an American. I mean,
she had worked in a food kitchen, and she put that in her personal statement. And Joe here, he helped build a sanitation system in the Congo. And then there is Yaakov. Yaakov killed children in Gaza. No, really. And we're supposed to treat all three as the same in the name of inclusiveness and pluralism. Now, that to me is a dictionary definition of insanity. I had a long exchange.
But I mean, it shows you how much they're owned, right? Like, and there's a point where they kind of get into it. Let's go to that at the end because I want to kind of wrap this up. But, it's well worth, I mean, people have the time for this. It's well worth watching from the perspective. And this guy has books, if you don't know about it. But, again, this is a Jewish guy who's, claims to be they get into the whole thing about these fake Holocaust survivors. And she has a whole thing. I think I might have something on that. But let's see what I have before I talk about it here. Okay, so there's this here.
We're going to make Gaza, they said over and over again, we're going to make Gaza unlivable. So you will have two choices, to stay and starve or to leave. That's why all this talk now about the Trump plan is so silly. There's nothing there. 95% of the homes, 95, have been vaporized.
I thought that it was 85, so it's up to 95.
It was 92% before the assaults on Rafah and Gaza City. So now it's about 95%. There is 50 million tons of rubble. The main agencies, UN and international humanitarian agencies, they say that it'll take until the year 2050 to clear away the rubble, because the rubble is mixed in with all of these toxic substances like asbestos and also
I talked about this, right? It's what happens when they do a controlled demolition. That's why this whole thing, they had a problem with the big event 2001. And I was, I think, the only person that kind of figured this out or talked about it. They had a problem with these skyscrapers like the Twin Towers and these big giant buildings because they exist in very high density population centers. So when they have these skyscrapers, you can see some of these controlled demolitions. And I believe they used, handheld nukes for that. Like I talk about that. There's a whole video I made on the Apocalypse channel, the backup channel. It's linked in the description box here. But I made a long video that I redid my videos that I made originally. I excluded the part that Israel played in the whole thing, or I didn't talk about it as in depth. But what they had was, when you build a skyscraper, you can see it with the King Dome in Seattle, and the tallest building, the tallest building that's ever been taken down, aside from the Twin Towers, was Building 7. Those are the 3 tallest buildings ever to be taken down, right? Whatever you believe the official story or not. And when they're taken down, there's all this toxic things in the buildings. It's going to go everywhere. It's an environmental disaster, and people are going to be affected. All the first responders, a high percentage of the first responders ended up with thyroid cancer, which would mean the most likely interpretation of that is the radioactive iodine that's in nuclear explosions that goes right to your thyroid. Your thyroid feeds off of iodine. That's why when there's a nuclear bomb, everyone's supposed to have iodine, the good kind. You have to research it. Not recommending things, but people, if you're worried about nuclear war, everyone should have a certain amount of iodine on hand, because you got to make sure your thyroid has enough iodine, because if it's searching for iodine and there's radioactive iodine that's there for about 7 days, and after a nuclear explosion, and then it disappears. Then you get thyroid cancer because this radioactive iodine gets sucked up by your thyroid, and then you have this explosion of iodine cancer that happened in Chernobyl. I was the person that kind of figured that out. I went and looked at this stuff in my, in whatever I did with these reports, right? But, you have these giant buildings that if you take them down, everyone's going to sue you. Like the city it's not like they just take them down and the dust dissipates in a couple days. There's toxic shit that goes all over the city and it's airborne. And it's there for a long time. And so, when they did this to the Gaza Strip, all those people are affected by that. When people are working in construction, you see them in demolition, they have to wear masks. And, if they're not wearing the appropriate mask, like with firemen things, with oxygen and whatever it is, right? They're inhaling all these particles. We know what cement particles are. Cancer, they cause cancer, lung cancer. And so, all that shit comes down, and there's asbestos and all these things in there, asbestos and all these other things. And so all these people are completely fucked in that area, even people who are living close to Gaza. And that stuff is toxic, and who knows what they use. If they use depleted uranium or anything like that, I can't imagine they would do that, but they did that in Iran or Iraq. And so there's that element of it, right? And now, how do they get rid of that stuff and build something else there? And then where do these people go? Because there's no country around them that wants them to, it's a mess. I want to do the Trump quote, but let me finish up here.
Exploded ordnance. So everyone says, well, Netanyahu didn't achieve his goal. Actually, he did achieve his goal.
Of course he did.
He said we will make Gaza unlivable. Either stay and starve or leave. He achieved his fundamental goal. Now, he was hoping for a stampede of them leaving or incentivized to leave by the relentless bombing and artillery firing. But now they'll leave in a trickle because there's nothing to go back to. There's nothing there. It's been pulverized. So,
one of the things I want to say that I found to be especially dark.
Okay, so they get into about these guys were filming the controlled demolition. Like somewhere in this, I'm not going to find the clip, but they talk about how there's videos out. So this guy, you could say he's controlled opposition. Like there's always like I don't, none of these things. I don't care. Like everybody has their good moments. Like I saw this when I worked with sex offenders. There were moments where they would have like human moments. They wouldn't be worthless pieces of shit that were, people born into just horrible circumstances, abusive families, and they get twisted and, generations of just pieces of shit, human beings, right? But there are moments, and some of these kids were like horrible. They're going to be in institutions the rest of their lives. But they have good moments. And I've been around saintly people, higher developed souls, and they have their low moments, right? People have moments of ego and people have moments of soul, regardless if they've taken money, regardless. Like everyone's corrupted, everyone's fucked. Like we live in a degraded time, right? But let's say this guy is controlled opposition. He has to have some passion. You start playing a role. We know what happens in Stockholm Syndrome and with the Stanford experiment. You play a role for a week and you start believing that role. There's actors, the guy before Christopher Reeves, the original TV Superman, forget his name, don't care, don't tell me, don't need to know. And he, there's movies about him, and he started believing he was Superman. That one guy, they have psychological issues. That one guy started to believe he was James Bond. And that's how people see him, like these Marvel characters. Like people see them, that guy is Spider-Man or Thor or whatever. And they start getting into it. They they start identifying with that, that character they're creating because it just becomes a thing. So even these, there's these people that get embedded. There's a guy who was in the FBI who was embedded in one of these fringe left groups, and he married some woman, and they had like 3 kids. And he was like a fucking spy the whole time, right? Like people lose themselves in their role. So we all know, we know these things are part of it. But let's say this guy is not controlled opposition, that his story is accurate. And he obviously has a passion. This is his thing, right? Like everybody has their thing that they woke up to. And for him, it's Gaza. He has an understanding of Gaza. He's written multiple books. He's traveled there. He's got a whole thing there. And he knows people that are in and around it, and he's just in the know. So, he has access to this. And there's these videos of Israeli soldiers, IDF soldiers, blowing up houses and celebrating and cheering in Gaza, like doing the controlled demolition. They weren't even bombing them. They were going in there and setting up controlled demolition and taking down these buildings, right? And so, like, it was a demolition site. Remember that there was an Israeli real estate agent who's saying that we got to get in on this because we now have done the demolition part. So they demolitioned the whole fucking country, and everybody who has half a fucking, brain, partially awake, and all these people who are players and, politicians around the world know it. And know that's like, how dangerous it is to have a country like America that's 100% puppeted? You don't think those Arab countries are freaked out by how much America is owned by the Israelis, right? So, like, this is, why wouldn't this be a catalyst to take America down? And more of it, right? All the things that you can infer and believe about, how bad it is to have a country this owned. The politicians are this owned. Trump is the president is this owned by a foreign country, that they would do this to 2 million people that lived in Gaza Strip. Like, it's just, this is horrific. Like, this is, it's, this is worse than lots of other tragedies and things that have been done in the past. Just on every level. And those people are being shipped out. Let's go to that. I want to go to that meme I have of Trump talking about how the Gazans, it's just they have bad luck there. So let's put that meme in here.
But we'll only be satisfied when all of these problems are solved, and we have the team to solve them, and that's going to happen. And it's going to happen, I think, very quickly. I also strongly believe that the Gaza Strip, which has been a symbol of death and destruction for so many decades, and so bad for the people anywhere near it, and especially those who live there, and frankly, who's been really very unlucky. It's been very unlucky. It's been an unlucky place for a long time. Being in its presence just has not been good, and it should not go through a process of rebuilding and occupation by the same people that have really stood there and fought for it and lived there and died there and lived a miserable existence there. Instead, we should go to other countries of interest with humanitarian hearts, and there are many of them that want to do this, and build various domains that will ultimately be occupied by the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza, ending the death and destruction and, frankly, bad luck. This can be paid for by neighboring countries of great wealth. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 12. It could be numerous sites, or it could be one large site. But the people will be able to live in comfort and peace, and we'll make sure something really spectacular is done. They're going to have peace. They're not going to be shot at and killed and destroyed like this civilization of wonderful people has had to endure. The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. They're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous and very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. I'm hopeful that this ceasefire could be the beginning of a larger and more enduring peace that will end the bloodshed and killing once and for all.
So they kind of get into it here. He's very liberal and she's very conservative, but she has this, well, let's just watch it.
That tells us that people, when they are armed with facts and knowledge, are fundamentally good. They're fundamentally good, and we're fighting back, and it's hard.
Yeah, that's not true.
people that are selling out. But I think truth is winning.
I believe truth is winning, and we have to. I think
that they were talking about here how is and it or that led up to this. So they're talking about these kids who are being they were being ostracized and told they'll never. They were law students. They were told that all the major law firms were said we'll never hire you, and they're blackballed. So you had these kids who were protesting, pro-Palestinian people who were being labeled as anti-Semitic, coming out of Harvard and some of these countries, some of these universities that have, their parents have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to get their law degree, and then they're coming out and they're not going to be able to work in any of these big law firms. They're blackballed, and like shit like that. And she was saying, "Good, let's start our own law firms." I wonder if maybe they'll even say that here.
Credited to two reasons. One is a horrible reason to credit. Israel is conducting a genocide in broad daylight.
Right.
It was very hard to conceal.
Mm-hmm.
But number two, it was because a large number of media outlets, in particular on the web, were out of control. And now there's a retrenchment, an attempt to control TikTok, control CBS News, control CNN. They're trying to now methodically gain control again of, as the expression has it, gain control of the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've been through this before. And COVID was a big one, but I was, there was stuff with, remember that little fuck, David Hogg, and those guys, where you have been able to talk about something freely on YouTube for years. And I talked about vaccines, and I talked about certain things, crisis actors, things like that. And then YouTube was told you can't talk about this, and even retroactively. And then you were getting community guideline strikes for something that you said 3 years ago. So that meant I had to privatize all my old fucking videos because I have so many of them, and I can't go search through every one of them and figure out which ones I talked about certain things. And so all my videos had to be privatized. I had fucking years of videos, hours of content. It fucks YouTube too, because now that shit's just sitting there, taking up fucking bandwidth, right? Or taking up, memory, storage. And so, I was able to survive those things. I mean, I've been smart about it. I could see them coming. But all these videos I've made and all the stuff I'm talking about Shekels, I won't be able to say it. Like, it'll just be done. You'll see it happen. And, the information will just disappear. There are so many great videos on 9/11 that I watched. I watched more videos about that than probably about anything when I was first, in this process. And I wasn't really making videos like that back then. And I was making homesteading videos. And that's all gone. Like, unbelievable amount of information. And all you guys who are younger or came in late to the truth community, you don't understand how much information, how much that had been exposed. And, probably much more. I mean, it's for the people who watch them, know about it, but like pretty much everyone would watch one or two videos or whatever. But I watched so many of them, and they're all gone. And the channels are all gone. The people who made the videos are gone, like all the legitimate people. And there's been groups of truthers that disappeared. Some of them are dead. Some of them quit. They just gave up. And, those people are experts to whatever extent. Alex Jones used to have real quality guests on, but then he was completely compromised, and he was always paid off by Israel. He would never criticize Israel. Like, it was everybody kind of knew that. But, then he turned into whatever piece of shit he is now, because he's been always controlled, but before he wasn't as bad. But, this is what will happen. And they'll just shut it down. It'll be like turning a faucet, and it's like they're playing, musical chairs. And if you don't clean up if you don't privatize all your videos in time, your channel's done, and you're like, you have to start up from scratch. But it'll be really hard for anybody to make videos. Like, I don't know how much truth or stuff I'll even cover then. Maybe I'll just talk about spirituality. Because, this is the big thing. For America, it's the ownership by the Zionists. It's Zionism. For America and truth, it comes down to that. There's other little things here and there. There's, things you can go. But really, it's pointless to talk about anything else when we see what we just saw. What I talked about in the introduction, right? Like, this video will be gone. This guy will disappear again. it'll just be like, all right, that's done. And it'll happen that quickly. We saw it with, how a lot of this stuff got reversed with Trump. Remember how quickly, you not only couldn't talk about vaccines and COVID, but you couldn't talk about alternative medicines. The pharmaceutical companies just say, fuck you, and shut it down. And all the social media companies just went in line with it. And so, that's to me the most likely scenario. That this is put out there, everyone talks about it. It's like, like it's a pressure cooker, and then everyone moves on, they lose interest, and then it just goes back to the way it was. With you talking about Israel is like an automatic, you get banned from YouTube and these other things. I mean, that's to me the most likely scenario. But, she's still, she's naive in this, or she's owned, or whatever it is. She keeps on pretending like there's a solution here, right?
And there's a real problem on our college campuses right now. There are students, professors, in fact, tenured professors, are terrified of saying anything supportive of the Palestinians or critical of Israel. You remember in the spring of 2024, there were all the encampments. And you know what? A whole academic year passed without anything. It was like this eerie silence had descended on the college campuses because the students were terrified. And so the media, academia, they're trying to regain control right now. And so I believe that people have, in particular on the college campuses, have to find, like you said earlier, it takes a lot of courage. There were a lot of students who were...
It doesn't take courage. When you understand that this system can't be saved, this is pointless. It takes courage to be a spiritual person. And courage isn't even the right word. It takes heart. It takes heart to embrace the divinity within you. And it's a battle between you and your ego. And your desire for material pleasures and materiality. And very few people are interested in that because they don't want to give up their life to God, right? Most religious people are the most egotistical people around. Especially pastors and people like Charlie Kirk. When you give your life to God, it's about service. And it isn't about feeding the poor, doing shit like that. Like, that's good. Everyone should do that. That's like, everybody should be compassionate and helpful to people because that's part of God's work. But it's finding out what God wants you to do, what special gifts you have, and using those gifts in the, benefit to the divine system without thought about your egotistical life and these other things. That you check with God before you do everything and you ask for God for permission. I had said a prayer some time ago, like I made a video like as a joke thing. Let's all pray, that we get exactly what we deserve and whatever America deserves and whatever, the world deserves and people deserve and that God just gives us what we deserve based on the merit of our, actions and attitudes and thoughts and all these things. I went on from there, right? And no one's going to want to say this prayer. How many people want to say, God, give me exactly what I deserve? God, give America exactly what we deserve, right? Because they want to hedge their bets because they know they've fucking done shit. And if there is karma, if there is a accountability system, if there are some skaras, which I talk about, impressions, and there is a divine system, then most people realize they're fucked. If there is a hell, what people think there isn't, but whatever. Because, they know deep down they can rationalize and, try to argue out of their bullshit way like they're talking to a cop out of a traffic ticket, but you can't do that with God. You can't do that with your soul, right? And so, standing up to Israel, standing up to these things, there's no point to it. And I don't care if these people don't know it. Candace Owens and this guy, because they have a job to do. But for the rest of us, you have to understand that. It doesn't matter. You're not going to fix the system. There's no way to fix it. And this guy's a little bit more aware of it because he's been beaten down and he realizes, there's, Dave Smith talks about how there's there's a group of Jewish people that are always against the Zionists, but they always lose because the Zionists have all the money. It's always this way, right? When there's a material battle and you have an evil that controls the power in the system, you lose. If it's a spiritual battle, then you win because they have no connection to God, right? And not a spiritual battle in the way that people think about. That you embrace spirituality and you ignore all this distracted bullshit that they put out there. You connect to God, divinity within you, and accept that there's a plan. You don't worry about all these motherfuckers. You don't worry about all these powerless people. That the only power that they have is to con you into believing they have power.
Suspended because of the encampments. They weren't allowed to attend graduation because of the encampments. And then if you were foreign students, you were rounded up because of the encampment. It does require courage.
But I also want to remind people, when you think that requires courage, is imagine being someone in Gaza right now.
Yeah, I
it's such a small price to pay, in my opinion. And was it scary? Yeah, I'm not going to pretend like last year was easy for me and my family. But me and my husband were so committed to truth that we were just like, whatever comes, whatever cost comes. You are now in that challenge, and people say, what would you have done? We are finding out right now what people would have done when faced with a genocide. Do you turn the other way? Do you accept the money? Do you continue to...
The majority of people, you guys aren't doing shit to stop the genocide. You didn't stop it. And you're not stopping the relationship with Israel. And if it stops, and there is a plan in place, and the people rise up, and this thing ends, and Israel no longer can pay America. If you go out and put all these motherfuckers in jail, all this kind of stuff, right? I have this one thing with Lindsey Graham my wife told me about. She sent it to me. I haven't seen it yet. I'll end with that after this thing. But, when there's an actual, change, not just fucking words, like this stupid Alex Jones thing about information war, you can wake people up and people can have the information, but voting doesn't matter. People have no power and no leverage in a dying system, in an overpopulated world where they want to fucking depopulate motherfuckers. And systematically the people that are going to give them a problem. I mean, that show Silo is an excellent example of this, right? You have evil control, but the people that controlling the system are keeping the system that everyone's 100% dependent on going. And so you have to, I don't want to say be compassionate towards them, but understand that, she calls them evil here, but they have a point of view that's legitimate. That if they stop doing evil shit, the system will implode. And for people in Israel, if they start parasiting off of America, Israel will end. And they don't give a shit if the rest of the world ends, but Israel survives. They don't care. They're very selfish-oriented, the Zionists. But most people are selfish. Most people, if they were given the choice of, we can destroy your country or every other country, they would choose every other country. They would choose their small country over every other country, their small family over everybody else, their themselves over everybody else. That's how selfish people are across the board. Egotistical. No one thinks of the greater good, or no one thinks of sacrificing themselves for the betterment of humanity, right? And so, none of these things make any difference because people aren't willing to go to the mat for any of these things, right? They ain't willing to sacrifice their. It's very easy to intimidate people out of doing something, especially when people know how fucked we are, which deep down everybody knows. That isn't going to change shit. If you're a whistleblower, if you become somebody who pisses off the powers that be, it isn't going to change a fucking thing. And so what's the answer? It's finding divinity within you and accepting that God has a plan, and all this shit that we're seeing is part of that plan, which includes the destruction of our civilization, our countries and our culture and all these things, because it has to fucking go. Because it's taking us away from our true purpose, right?
To be a part of the apparatus of the academia, which lies routinely. That's why I say people should read Thomas Sowell, and he will tell you that every bad idea comes from academia. It comes from the cult of academia. They will always publish the books and lie about what's happening, and it's because actually it's always been controlled. So we're trying to achieve academics when in reality it's a small club, and you got to have the right perspectives if you want to stay in it, no matter how accomplished or if you're brighter. And I really challenge people to recognize that. So you are talking about maybe losing, you know, money.
You know, for a young person, I try to be sympathetic. For a young person,
Okay, so this goes on for a while. It's kind of interesting, but I'm just going to wrap this up because just for time, and I don't care. You probably don't want to see it. But they go back and forth here. But, he gets it a little bit more than she does. But the issue is, do you see a plan? Like, what's your plan in a way that's realistic for overthrowing the powers that be and then getting the people to buy into a completely new system? If you wipe out the debt, then that's all the wealth. There's a $250 billion of debt as wealth that disappears. The debt that is considered currency. And if you pay that debt off, it disappears. People are using that as currency, debt, right? IOUs from other people. Our currency itself is an IOU. So all of our money is debt. All that we value is debt. And if you get rid of that debt, which is demonic, which is a good thing, then there's no currency. You lose quadrillions of dollars of buying power, like at least $2 quadrillion of buying power. And so how do you make a good economy? Like, how do you get people, and you got to get everyone to buy into it across the globe. You got to get each person to accept radical changes to their lifestyle and behavior and the way we do things. Like, we're all part of it. We're all been indoctrinated to the system. And you see little piece of it. Oh, let's get rid of this relationship between Israel and America. Let's get rid of this parasitic relationship. Okay, yeah, that's a fraction of 1% of the overall problem. I mean, it's a pretty big one for Americans, but that doesn't solve America's problems. That's one thing. I mean, the amount of money that America is giving to Israel, the amount of shit that's America doing for Israel is only a fraction of the bigger problem. That's not going to create money for Social Security or create, it's not going to pay off the debt. It's not going to do any of these things, right? And so there, you see little bits of problem, but the real problem is the system itself, which everybody is habituated to and addicted to. And so what do you do with that? How do you get rid of the system? How do you tell people or get people to buy into a new system and buy into changing? How do you get people to convince, I work for, change is what I talk about here. And, I've made thousands upon thousands of hours of videos, and so much of it talks about spirituality being the only solution, which I am 100% 100% convinced of through my own experience. And you hear me talk about it. And how many people has actually done something with that? Like all the people, millions of people have watched my videos, millions of hours of content. People have watched my videos all the time. How many of those people have changed? Because people don't want to change. I know it. Like I have a master's degree in counseling. I work as a preceptor, and I'm in the business of my self change through the divine system, Massage Marg, which is the best system for any of this kind of connecting people to divinity within them. And I know it's hard as fuck to change. And the older you get and the more habituated you are to things, your lifestyle and all the rest of it's really hard. You know it is. Like, go camping, right? Go live off the grid for a month. And you'll know how hard it is to change. You see people go on these shows, Survivor and Naked and Afraid and things, and they starve themselves, all that kind of shit. Change is difficult. Change in lifestyle. But changing who you are as a person and embracing your higher nature is like the hardest thing. That's why there's less saints than anything else, right? If being a sainthood, being a saint, being a spiritual master, being somebody who reaches a higher level of spirituality, that's something that people can do. It's been documented over and over again. There are people who have reached higher levels. There's people who reach just lower levels of sainthood and spirituality. And it's probably the smallest group of people, per, other movements and things. I mean, there's lots of people who are experts and masters in every other field. There's many more people who are masters of music or education or sports or, brilliant coaches and things. There's more people who reach highest levels of that kind of shit, material shit, than, the fraction of, there's a fraction of that number that reach high spiritual attainment. It's the hardest thing to do because people don't want to fucking give up their individual sovereignty and their egotistical pursuits. Their ego doesn't want to submit to God. And that's always been the problem. And so, until people get it, there's no anything, right? Like this stuff is, people are just talking. They're just talking about change. And they're usually talking about other people changing or systemic changing, but they're not talking about what they have to do personally. And so that's the real tragedy. And whether you're a shill or you're taking the shekels or you're just some dumb fuck or whatever it is, or you're some brilliant person who can talk about things, but as long as you're not embracing some kind of inner change, then you're worthless and you're not getting it done. Okay, so I have a comment to get to. I have the portion of this video I've already made that has a bunch of funny shit in it. And so this is kind of an epic video, and I have this one comment I want to get to. But I think I want to get to let me do the other thing here first with Lindsey Graham. The Republican Jewish Coalition.
He recognized Jerusalem as capital of Israel. Why? Because if you got a problem with that, take it up with God. He's the guy that did it, not Trump.
Okay, take it up with God. The Christian Judaic religion, it's nothing. It's not, it's produced some saints and high spiritual people, not high spiritual people, but some spiritual people, including Jesus. But they're on the first, or they're in the process of making it to the first rung, or going to the first rung of spirituality. Like, it's a truth that, I can say I'm 100% certain on from my own experience, my reading of the biblical, teachings and the biblical stories. It's a very remedial book. It's like reading kindergarten. When you've been exposed to higher levels of spiritual training, which exist, the Sajmark system has amazing books, and the experience is the real thing. The books are nothing compared to the experience. Book is just a book. And books are great for knowledge, and, you can have sometimes a spiritual experience from a book if you think about it. But it's like you read the book and then you ruminate over what you read. And that's the spiritual experience. And you can do that with the Bible, some parts of it. But most of it's just horrible. The Bible's a shitty book. Especially, 75% of it's the Old Testament. And there's nothing good in the Old Testament. Because the being is not God. And, and there's no way to argue if you look at all the stupid and evil shit that God says to do, all the pettiness, all the jealousy that God represents, the God of the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible, that's not God. That's not anything like God. It's the opposite. It's a demon. Woo!
So I just want to say, I feel good about the Republican Party. I feel good about where we're going as a nation. We're killing all the right people and we're cutting your taxes.
Killing all the right people. This is this piece of shit, right? So Trump put out this guy's, I'll show you that next. Woo, kill the right people, woo, babies.
Trump is my favorite president. We've run out of bombs. We didn't run out of bombs in World War II.
Because you gave them all to fucking Israel.
So
look at this piece of shit, right?
As a coalition,
this is, as much as the truth's coming out, they're able to just say this shit and have this guy's going to be reelected. This guy's a senior senator from a Republican state, South Carolina. He's going to be reelected until he decides not to do this. He's been a fucking closeted gay weird fuck since the beginning in a very Republican state. And they love this fucking guy, right?
Of Republicans, some Baptist, some Jewish, we organize ourselves around principles that we love and we cherish. We love individual freedom. We love entrepreneurship. We love capitalism.
Love killing babies in Gaza.
We love Israel.
Woo, woo. You fucking slave. Bow down and fucking lick tank, bro. You piece of shit slave. You $100 million slave, right?
We love the idea of Israel. We love the struggle they've been involved in. We love them, helping them because you're helping yourself.
He said, if you don't fucking stand up for Israel, if we don't do that, God will destroy America. That's what he fucking said, this piece of shit. Tucker Carlson ran this thing. What a piece of shit.
So to those who worry about these stupid interviews and far off places, don't worry. The Republican Party has figured it out when it comes to Israel. We understand that Israel is a friend of America to the bitter end.
Yeah, what have they done for us? You know what? They're not even your friend. You hint at criticizing them, they'll fucking cut your nuts off. Like the only thing that could get this guy not reelected is if he criticized Israel, and then they take him out.
We understand that God blesses those who bless Israel. And where I come from, I figured that crap out when I was 6 years old. God
And I started taking shekels when I was 6 years old. God
bless you. Thank you very much.
God bless you guys. Give me more shekels. Throw shekels on. I want shekels. Shower me with shekels. Boom. Here's the shekels. Shower me with shekels. 100 shekels. There's the shekels there. There's the shekels. The fucking all these parasites on here. Get the shekels, bro. Get those fucking shekels. The Turanian shekel. Shekel. There it is. The thing of the whatever that thing is there. Get your shekels. Shekels for everybody. Shekels for you. There's Oprah Winfrey. You know, just you get a shekel and you get a shekel. So Donald Trump was such a dick when he was a candidate, which I love. This is hilarious. You know, but I mean, not a good person. And this is how GOP presidential candidate Senator Lindsey Graham responded after fellow candidate Donald Trump gave out his cell phone number. So Trump, in a very dickish way, Lindsey Graham criticized him. They were both running for president in 2016. And so Trump said, well, he had asked me for money, and he gave me his cell phone number, you know, years and years ago or whatever. He had his number. So he said, and he gave out his fucking phone number. And so this is how Lindsey Graham responded. So how to destroy your cell phone with Lindsey Graham. So this was his idea of, you know, a solution to Donald Trump giving out his cell phone. I mean, this weird motherfucker, he just did all these things. Like he's thinking that you want to vote for this guy for president. Like they came up with these things. I mean, like, and this guy's so effeminate. So, you know, he seems like a closeted gay dude. I mean, everybody, you know, has got the name Lindsay, dropping it off a thing. So this was his solution, right? You know, they were adversaries and going at it here.
You can all else fails, you can always give your number to the Donald. This is for all the veterans.
Why is it for all the veterans? How does that help the veterans? Throwing some old flip phone? How does that help the veterans? I mean, you know, back then, this is 2016, they had fucking iPhones. He's getting these cheap flip phones, and then he's throwing it. That's for all the veterans, right? And it's for Israel, too. Israel and the veterans, you know, the most important people. So this is how fucked things are, right? This is how fucked up everything is. So I got one voiceover to do, then I have more content. This is kind of a mega video, some real funny shit. I got a funny voiceover to do. And then I have some kind of spiritual voiceover that goes with the beginning of the video. So this is going to be a long video. I don't know how long it's going to be, but let me get to the other thing here. Okay, so the end of the video that you're going to see these other clips, and then there's a spiritual thing at the end. That's all I had when I received this comment. And this comment and what I'm about to say to it applies so much more now. I kind of had a revelation about it. I hope this is it here. Paul, don't get mad at me, but okay, see, like, whenever you say something like that, you are putting something out there to somebody, and you no longer control how they react to it. Now, I'm not going to get mad at you. I don't get mad at comments. Like, I don't read a comment and steam around and think about it over and over again and let it wreck my day. You know, that's something that used to happen. Yeah, I can't even remember when I would be affected by something that happened on social media. That someone would say something to me and I would get mad about it and it would affect me and I would get, you know, let it sink in. You know, the only comments that I really pay attention to, I mean, it's great when you get comments where people are doing something positive and that I've affected them in a positive way. But I mean, it also means that I people are saying those words, but who knows if they're telling the truth, right? I take them in good faith, but everything's like that. How I don't even know who's saying it. Like it could be a bot, it could be a shill. I mean, anything that's said, even this comment here. Who knows what's really behind this or whatever it is. So I just take it with a grain of salt, and it means nothing to me. These things, in terms of the hostile ones, because mostly I find them funny, or there's just something I ban the person and move on, right? But the person saying that they want to control my reaction, don't get mad at me, right? Well, you're going to say something that I don't want to hear, right? That's like, I'm going to say something you don't want to hear, so I just want to be sure that you don't react in any way you choose, but you react the way I choose. Like, how do you have other relationships with other people? Like, if you say something to people, then you lose control of how they're going to react to it. You can't control how they're going to react to it. And if you think you can, then you're a shitty person to have relationships with. Like, this isn't about me getting mad. It's about you being a piece of shit that wants to say something I don't want to hear and want to control my reaction. This is already a fuck you to me. You're saying, fuck you, I'm going to say something you don't like, but you don't get to get mad. So it's silly. It's immature, too. Don't get mad at me, but why say the F word? I've been through this. It's a big thing that keeps on coming back up. I don't know if I'm getting all these Christians from the Charlie Kirk or people who actually like my videos, but they're, this is who I am and this is what I do. You got to accept all of it. If there's parts you don't like, tough fucking shit, right? Like, that's it. And, there's times I don't swear. When YouTube was demonetizing videos for language, I was not swearing, so it's not something I have to do, but I get to do it. And it's not a big deal. I mean, listen to the rest of this thing here. But why say the F word? You are spiritually in a good way, hopefully, and that word literally curses your spirit. Like, holy shit, bro. It makes you have bad moods when you don't want one. You need to refrain from cursing yourself so you do not die. So you do not die? Spiritual people are affected by certain things, and you are spiritual. Sorry to offend you. I said prayer for you. Amen. And then I realized, this is the thing. And I went, holy shit. I wonder if, like, the majority of my audience is, like, retarded, like, fucking really stupid. I don't mean that in, like, Down syndrome way, obviously. People who are really just, maybe, like, what's probably happened is that I've been, like, making fun of really stupid people who leave me stupid comments because they just are really stupid. And maybe I'm just attracting really stupid people. Like, I've been mocking stupid people because, like, I've banned so many stupid people. Like, I've banned more people than leave comments in terms of, like, people who regularly leave comments, that I ban all the stupid people, and then I have smart people leaving comments, or some people who get it. And I think my audience is really intelligent because I always say that. But when it comes down to it, I just have a really stupid people, and people are really stupid. And I'm just mocking the shit out of them, but they don't have the capacity to understand what I'm talking about here. And I'm just wasting my fucking time. And I've just been making fun of really stupid people because that's the stupidest shit ever. If you look at what I've covered in this video, there's real evil shit going on out there. I worked in a treatment center with kids who were sex offenders and had been sexually abused, and I worked in outpatient clinics. And the shit I saw and heard and read about, in terms of these kids' intake files and, the things that I saw and the things that, these twisted people, these little kids who were sexually abused and they started to abuse other little kids, and fucking how fucked up that all was. And then all the other things I saw working in the psychological field. People have been in war even worse. My brother told me all these stories. He started to counsel vets, and he heard these horrific stories, and, he shared them with me, and I'm like, they're fucking, I wish I could forget them, right? If you understand what people are capable of in war-torn areas or what kind of abuse that's going on out there, and the kind of fucking shit that people would do, and living with my ex and her twisted psychological bullshit that I lived through and all the stuff that I've seen out there, right? And you're concerned about me fucking swearing? You know, like that's the stupidest shit ever, right? Like maybe you're just that fucking dumb. And that you would leave this comment like you're trying to be a concern troll and you're worried about my soul being affected by me swearing. You think that's the least of my fucking, you think that's the worst problem I fucking have, right? Like the worst thing that's going on in the world and the least things that I have to deal with, right? In my own situation, whether I'm swearing or not, right? Like there's real shit going on here, bro. And I think that these people are just that fucking stupid. And I make fun of them and things, but maybe I should be like, aware of like how degraded things are. Like I think I have a kind of a good grasp of it. But now that I think about it, like there's just a lot of really stupid people that leave comments and that's the best they can do. Like they're just out there bumping into shit and just fucking they can't even tie their shoes and they leave comments on my videos and I'm like, expecting them to have like the ability for abstract thought. And I think that if they're watching my videos, they get it. This person says I'm a spiritual person. But I think it's just because I say the word God, not because they understand what spirituality is. Like, that's just, so holy shit. Sorry to offend you. I said a prayer for you. What kind of prayer could you possibly said, right? How do you think I'm going to react to this? Like, people should understand if I've put out a shit ton of content showing the way I think about things and how I would react to things. Like, how do you think I'm going to react to this? I mean, if I don't just ban you and delete it and don't say anything about it, the only other way I'm going to react is I'm going to read your comment and I'm going to dissect it and mock you for being a fucking moron. And, it probably is like, that's worse than swearing. Like, you're encouraging my bad behavior. You're praying for me to stop swearing, but like, you're encouraging me. You're like giving me crack, fucking, for someone who likes to mock stupid fucks, you're giving me crack, right? You're like, here, let me put this stupid comment up on a tee for you. It's much worse for me to be mocking dumb fucks than it is for me to say dumb fucks, right? To say the word fuck. It's worse for me to be mocking them spiritually. But I got to do something. Like, holy shit. Like, I have to do something to deal with the stupidity of the whole thing. Like, I just, I can't, I can't just, it has to be somehow expressed. Like, it just can't, I can't allow it just to linger inside of me. When I read all this stuff, I have to react to something just to get it out there. So I don't have to, like, absorb and eat all this stupidity. Like, I'm just absorbing all this stupidity in my internal world. Like, I'm hoping people can just find divinity within them, which shouldn't be that fucking hard because we have it inside of us and our soul wants us to do that and God wants us to do that. So there's a lot going for us to find divinity within us, but in that, the level of stupidity, and when I mean stupidity, the lack of consciousness and awareness and just stupid shit. Like, people hear something. Yeah, swearing isn't great for you spiritually. Like, it's not, swearing doesn't benefit you spiritually. The words do have our energy and power in them. But, like, it's so fucking gross out here. You're in a war zone. It's like you're sitting there and there's a war zone and you're watching some woman's run across the street with her kid. And you're hiding behind a car. And she gets hit by some fucking, she's got a baby in her hands and something fucking blows them both up in front of you. Like, they just explode the woman and her child. And you go, holy shit. And the person goes, hey, don't swear. That's bad for you spiritually. Like, like that's what you're fucking talking about here. Like, did you see what we just saw? You think the thing that, I talk about some scars, impressions. What do you think is going to leave a longer impression? The woman and her baby exploding in front of you? Or the fucking swearing the swearing that you did? Which is going to be worse for you? Which is the thing that's going to keep you up at night for maybe the rest of your life? What's the thing that you're never going to forget about, right? Like, the swearing is, there's not great for your spiritual evolution. Neither is mocking. But we're talking about, like, levels of depravity here that are just, and levels of just, spiritual heaviness and grossness that you can't even conceive of. And so, anyways, here's the part of the video I made yesterday. And then after that, I have a voiceover, and this thing will be done. Okay, so I just realized, because I saw this comment yesterday, and I realized when I read it, I kind of alluded at this, that, maybe I just been trolling the handicapped, mentally handicapped. Like, I've been mocking mentally handicapped now for 10 years. But, like, it's everybody. Like, there's so many remedial people out there. And, I'm aware of this. I go to Walmart, you never know how bad it is, but you get a sense of it. It's always worse than you think. But that's where we're at, right? Like, it's not just the corruption and the shit, that the boldness of the criminals and what they're willing to push through and what they're willing to say and endorse, and like all the shit that they're saying. I mean, I just showed you 2 clips. One guy said we're killing the right people. Another guy got a big laugh from Bill Maher's audience for talking about killing babies in Gaza, or talking about dead babies in Gaza as a punchline. These are mainstream people, and it's just getting worse. I mean, that's where we're at. There's a degradation in our country and our world, and it's everybody. It's not just the famous people. And so, the stupidity is off the charts, as is the immorality, and that's when society's end. That's when things collapse, because there's just too much, like, fucking twisted, warped, fucking bullshit people out there. And then everyone's worse than they would be. Everybody's on the, trending in the wrong direction. Anyways, let's get into the other stuff, the other part of this video that I made yesterday. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is Sunday, November 2nd. This video won't be up till, I believe, Tuesday. So, we'll see when I was going to begin it today. I have a little extra time. So I covered this thing with the Trump boys. Eric Trump will do the meme, and Don Jr. Don Jr. was a real douche on The Apprentice, like, just obnoxious. They're all very weird kids. You hear them talk. They didn't have a normal life. Donald Trump doesn't know what it's like to live a normal American life. He grew up as a millionaire, arrogant, narcissistic. And, he got started by he inherited his dad's company, was given $15, $20 million, $40 million worth of, startup money. I mean, all these things, And he ran the companies into the ground like he was a fuck up. So, they're a weird family. They're not normal. They are here. And so they like to go do this big game hunting. Like I said, I don't begrudge people hunting for food. I think it's a good thing. But, they're killing endangered species, leopards. These high budget, traveling to Africa, killing exotic animals. It's like a bloodlust thing. So they're not, it isn't like just normal hunting stuff. Is that the guy there? Where there, is that him? I don't know. But they're out there. They're not, doing this for food and these things. Like he's killing a deer, which is a little bit different, right? A deer are overpopulated. But trophy hunters are something different. If you're using the meat for food, or you're clearing out, like there's too many deer on your property, right? You're, whatever it is. Like there's an overpopulation. Yeah, that's great. That's you're doing a service, right? And if you do a clean kill and the thing you put the thing out of its misery with some respect, it's everything's going to die at some point. I'm not an anti-hunting person, like I said, but these clowns are doing something different here, right? Is these guys here? I don't know. So there's that.
But I'm glad he acknowledges that I'm a good boy. I am a good boy.
So Kamala Harris got AI'd. I'm pretty bad.
He has no plan to replace it. He said, concepts of a plan. Oh, you all watched the debate.
It's scary because, let's see, I remember her, this is the actual speech. They didn't tamper with the vocal. And her vocal matches the face, right? Because her voice was strained. There isn't that much Kamala Harris hate, so that shows you that she never really had a chance of beating Trump. Like Kamala is more or less, she's no way nearly hated as much as Hillary was. And the Democrats don't like her, right? Democrats didn't want to vote for her, which I often talk about. But AI, I mean, brutal. So I've been recommended a lot of these AI remixes, and many of them are very good. They're all good. Some are better than the original. And I want to comment on them. This is Oliver Anthony's Rich Men North of Richmond. This is like a Leonard Skinner version.
Bullshit pay so I can sit out here and waste my life away. Drag back home and drown my troubles away. It's a damn shame.
So I heard some guy talking about this, and maybe it was a Joe Rogan interview, and someone who had used these tools. And they put in a 5-word prompt and, gave a song and had it, they said, a few different versions of music they wanted being converted to. And AI produced this with only that amount of input, which, there's things that they do. There's a lot of detail in it. And it's kind of scary in two different ways. Like, not that we should be scared, but I'm just in terms of the capability, because I've gone back and forth on AI. But music is emotional, and you have to be able to feel vibrations. And, we respond to vibrations. We are vibrations. Vibrations is a huge part of the Sajmarg meditation. And people give off vibrations, and places do. And there's vibratory field in the world. And, it's like when you get barometric pressure and things like this, and, there's energy, and you go to certain places, you get headaches, and other places make you feel happy. And, there's all these things. We have water in our system and all this other stuff that's, there's these different energies. There's electricity in our system. We're complex creatures, and we're affected. And the more spiritual we become, the more sensitive we are to that effect. And, of course, ultimately, there's the most subtle vibration, which is love, right? Which is the basis of all creation. And so music is, can take you to various places emotionally and even spiritually. And it's, the vibrations of music, it's a very positive, powerful effect. I talk about this because, music is often used to elicit emotional responses in shitty movies or propaganda, where they play certain types of music to make you feel a certain way. It evokes emotional responses in these other things, right? People know this. And so why would a computer, as smart as AI or as the processing power of AI, why would it be able to reproduce this stuff, right? I mean, why would it be able to, very nuanced, like, it copies, it can't really tell jokes. Like, their jokes are abysmal. They don't understand jokes, like they do from a very mental state, I guess, but their jokes are horrible. I haven't heard any good jokes come out of an AI. And they get some things really wrong. But why are they so good at getting music right? Because it's not mathematical. There's the knowledge of various notes and styles of music. But they're able to do it, and sometimes there's just these little subtle touches to it. I was listening to there's a song, Can't Tell Me Nothing by Kanye. Some of the rap songs, it's great. And they did it in this old style 70s sort of R&B music. And let me pull that one up.
Hey, wait till I get my money right. Yeah, then you can't tell me nothing right. Excuse me.
So there's the details and the subtlety of it. And so either the AI computing capacity is so great that it can somehow mentally figure out and put music into some sort of pattern and take these genres and convert these songs into these various other genres, or it has the capacity to understand and feel music and vibration. So either one of those things would be kind of disturbing. Like I said, there's a lot of things with AI that's, I don't even use ChatGPT anymore. I use it on my phone, but it's just not as good as it once was. And I think they want you to buy the other thing, or it's been, corrupted in some way. Gemini is limited because it only uses Google. stuff. I mean, I still use these things, and they're a good search engine. I don't really use it for anything else, but I've had my mixed feelings about it. But the music thing is very impressive, and like I said, it's not mathematical, mental, or some way that they can. Usually when they put things together like this, they don't have the human capacity to understand it, and they can understand music for whatever that means, and so that's concerning. For a lot of reasons that I just said. Anyways, I want to cover this more there's a whole thing going on with Tucker Carlson and Sam Altman. I want to get more into AI. But just remember, AI has never really heard music. They don't have the capacity to hear. And in these songs, there's nobody singing, and there's no instruments being played. They're just taking all of this, knowledge and data and creating music digitally. And that you hear it, in an audio, and again, I'll restate this later, but you're hearing it through your ears, but they're not making it that way. They're making this digitally. And then when you play the video, it creates the music, but no instrument, like there's no instruments involved, there's no anything, there's nothing musical involved. It's just 100% made from digital content, it's made from code. All right, one of my viewers sent me this.
Cause I'm an island boy, and I'm just trying to make it. I'm an island boy, I'ma keep it like an island boy. I'ma keep it like a ooh guat guan. I'ma keep it like a ooh guat guat.
The banana, the banana hair is great. Or those plantains? I think those are plantains. I haven't checked in on the Island Boys in a while now. I'm not going to do so now, but they're always funny. I think there's people who act stupid, and there's celebrities, and there are people just are stupid. If you ever see the movie of Jerry Lee Lewis, Great Balls of Fire, I play the piano. Like, I think Jerry, based in that movie, I don't know much about him, was that stupid. He married his 13-year-old cousin. That's pretty stupid. Of course, Cardi B and the Island Boys and some others that, I don't think it's an act. But who knows? Hindus have acquired over 100 acres for a massive temple complex in rural Mankur, North Carolina. The Tamils failed to build the world's largest statue of the warrior god Murugan, which would be taller than the Statue of Liberty. I think this is just this manufactured. These temples are weird, especially if they start playing music. That'll be annoying for the neighbors. But it seems like it's out in the wilderness here. And I don't know much about this particular figure. Tamil is the southern part of India where the Brahmins live. But if it's out here, practically no one will see it. But they manufacture this stuff to get people. It's manufactured outrage. I don't know where the comments are. I don't know how to get to the comments of this post. As I said, do I click on this? No, that's for me to leave a comment. I don't know how to get to the comments here. Maybe I can't. Well, anyways, I think you have to be subscribed, or maybe, I don't know. But, they manufacture outrage because who gives a shit? No one really cares about the Statue of Liberty. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's just a weird thing. And I'm not sure why they're doing it, but, So, it's not going to bring people to Hinduism. I mean, people might visit it just as a goof, but I've gone to one cool temple in Hyderabad, and they built it up a mountain. And there's just all these cool things along the way, like statues suck. Like I was talking to my wife about, I'm like, no one gives a shit about statues anymore. Like no one cares about the Statue of Liberty. There's a time where people were impressed by idols and statues, things that were, massive. I mean, there are some things that are, like if they made those Lord of the Rings, those giant guys, and carved them out of stone, and but for the most part, statues are no longer impress people. people today, modern people, aren't impressed by shit like that. You know, some architecture is amazing, but you know, not these things. And so it's, you know, it's no one gives a shit, right? And so they manufacture this outrage, but who really cares? And so if you're a billionaire, why are you a billionaire? No hate, but give your money away, says Billie Eilish. I guess this guy's a billionaire, maybe. Hey, Billy, big fan here. I noticed you're playing in New Orleans next week. One of the poorest cities in USA, and the lowest price seat is $129. Why not make make all the seats free? Yeah, Billy, why not, bro? So I'm not sure if somebody sent me this or I just saw it on Twitter. I think I just saw this on Twitter, and I don't go on Twitter. I don't know how I saw this. But the person says, tell me this is normal. You know, this is going around. And I had a few more comments about it because they point out this. Here, let's get rid of that. They point out this thing here, right? The hand on the back of the head. But there's a couple of things here. So, you know, when you are interacting with members of the opposite sex, there is, you know, we live in a very sexually charged society. And people just have poor boundaries. And, you know, when you work in like treatment centers with sex offenders, you're told to wear loose clothing, and you are told that any kind of positive feedback you give to people, the kids or whatever it is, you know, anything that they hear that's positive or any number of things can be seen as flirtatious, right? Because they're sexually fucked up. They were sexually abused as kids. And there's people like that who are very sexualized because they were messed up as kids, or, you know, lots of these kids grow up watching porn. So many of them are like highly sexualized, you know, now who are adults, grown people. There's a lot of people who are sex addicts, and they're thinking about sex all the time, right? We know that there's a very powerful sexual component to our society. And so whatever you do with other people, you don't want to misconstrue it as being flirtatious. Now, she's extraordinarily flirtatious, right? You know, you don't want to make it appear to be. My ex was like this, where everything she did was sexualized because she was abused as a kid. And she was very flirtatious when she was, you know, around men or whatever, the way that she interacted with them. Very similar, not identical to the way Erica Kirk does this. But, you know, these beta sex kittens. And so they don't know, they don't have boundaries, and they don't know what's appropriate. And, you know, like looking at each other's eyes, making eye contact, that stuff is very, you know, sexualized. And so that's the first piece. So like when you're, and then, you know, what she's wearing there with the leather pants, and, you know, she's on the market now. It's been 7 weeks. And she wasn't really grieving properly. She's weird. She's just like off. And so, you know, people think about this when they're interacting. And someone like this is getting hit on all the time, right? Someone who puts a lot of effort into her appearance, right? A former beauty queen, you know, these people, women like that are always being, you know, men will lock in on them, right? Like that's how like people know, you know, there's this energy that people have, and they'll lock in on you sexually. And that's why you make eye contact. It can be uncomfortable, things like that. And so she's aware that guys are, you know, looking at her sexually or whatever, romantically or whatever it might be. And so if you're in that situation, you don't want to send any kind of wrong messages. But then there's everybody's fucking watching you, right? Like this is a public event on top of it. And so there's just the interaction between the two people where there's no boundaries here, and it's, you know, weird. And then everyone's watching it. You know, it's going to be seen, it's being scrutinized, you know, down to the clothing that you wore with the leather pants and all this other shit. And these are all choices that you make. You know, and I mean, there's body language, and there's also physical contact, and that whole thing is fucked up, right? And of course, there's the Illuminati eye up here. I guess that's the person making the video. So you got that on top of it. So anyways, you know, there's a lot going on there, right? And, you know, there's a lot of information that you get when you look at people in the eye. You know, I'm very sensitive to that. Like all this information comes pouring in. It makes me uncomfortable. And so I'm not a person that loves eye contact, especially with strangers and this other thing. But, people are so desperate and so, like, vampirish and needy. And so there's that element as well. Like, people will, misread. You give people just a little bit of positive feedback, and they're like, oh, we get married? It's like people are like that now. Like, people are fucked up. And everyone kind of knows it. And someone like this would totally know it. And then there how this appears. He's a politician, and he's married, and she's, supposed grieving widow. And so, unless they're doing this on purpose, they want this reaction. How could they not figure this is the way it would look, right? I mean, it looks really bad, and they have publicists, and they're educated about this shit. So, anyways, it's fucked up.
An old friend who's been with me a long time, a brilliant thinker.
White House economic advisor Jared Bernstein joins us now from the White House.
Thanks so much. The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollar, so why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do?
Holy shit! I hope this is not real, but I think it is.
They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Since they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah. So a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing. But there is no question that the government prints money, and then it uses that money to let's see. They print money, and they use that money they sell bonds, they borrow. I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Like, because it's like the government clearly prints money, does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
Holy shit. So I'm not an economic person. But the concept of inflation, like I stay away from economics only through being a truther, and I wanted to look into the economy, and now I understand certain things from the truther perspective. Not as a businessman, I wouldn't be a good bean counter. I'm not built that way, right? But the reason that you have so much money in circulation, and when you add more money to that circulation, your money has like a market cap, a level of value. And when you add more money to the circulation, then the money gets devalued, right? That's what's called inflation. And so when you print more money, the value of your money goes down. Like, everybody fucking understands that. It's, bare basic economics. And so that's where inflation comes from. And so, this idea that they're loaning money by printing it comes from the fact that they're devaluing the currency. Now, it's a little different for America because we have the world reserve currency. All the currencies are pegged on the petrodollar. But that's inevitably going to change, and they're already trying to change it with Brexit and some of these other countries. And they're starting to, Gaddafi did that, and they murdered him. So, but if America didn't have the world reserve currency, and there wasn't some artificial way of keeping the inflation down from all this money that was printed, and they're not even printing that much money compared to, like, there's not enough American dollars. There's not, the amount of currency that's available is something like 5% of the total, value, what people think about value of the dollar, right? Because banks are loaning money out of thin air, money they don't have, money they don't physically have in the bank. They're not loaning you money that they have in the bank. The banks have very little money. And so when they give you a loan, they're creating currency. It's another way of printing money. And now all this money is digital. 95% of money is digital. There's not that much currency. It's something like 20 trillion. Is it less than $20 trillion? Let me check that. So from ChatGTP, as December 31st, 2024, total value of U.S. currency in circulation was approximately $2.3229 trillion. So $2.33 trillion. About 55.4 billion notes, that's the currency, that includes various denominations, with 100 bill being the most prevalent, accounting for a significant proportion of the total value. It's important to note that a substantial amount of U.S. currency circulates internationally, serving as a global reserve currency. And so there's only $2.3 trillion of printed American currency. And we have $37 trillion in debt, right? And then, collective debt, we have $100 trillion in credit card debt and all these things. And then there's the derivatives market, right? And so there's all that shit. And, the dollar, there's not enough currency to go around for any of it, right? And there's all the digital imaginary currency, and now there's the crypto stuff and all that stuff as well. But there's $quadrillion worth of debt just for America, $1 quadrillion, like $2 quadrillion globally or more. This is why our economy is so fucked, right? And this guy doesn't know anything about that, right?
Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is the 200 and, 29th edition of the Journey series. It's hard to keep track of them now. So I already did a voiceover for kind of an epic video that's going to go after this about how, I realized that it's now obvious that Americans will put up with anything. Like I've always said this, like until people don't have food, internet, electricity, some of these major lifestyle things, there won't be any real, there'll be protests and complaints on the internet and, whatever little whiny stuff that goes on. But this stuff with Trump just coming out and, failing over and over again, and then the rest of these things, failing his people, like going back on his promises and them just going along with it, and then all the other stuff that he's pulling, and the stuff with him just being owned by Israel, and being obviously complicit on a genocide. I don't even know what to call that in Gaza, because it's a huge land grab, a total destruction of everyone's property and homes, controlled destruction. It's like doing it's doing a gentrification project where you get rid of all the people in a neighborhood while they're in it. Like it's a closed area that's occupied. It's an ethnic cleansing. It's a genocide. It's a gentrification relocation project without relocating the people and just destroying their homes while they're in it, or they're standing there watching you. And just all the stuff that happened. We all kind of, anybody who's got a pulse, and there's a lot of people who are just dead inside who, but even them, and the people who are taking the money, who are taking the shekels, they know that lots of people know, and they don't care. The knowledge is out that Trump and all these people are owned by Israel, and the stuff with Jeffrey Epstein allowing, what is considered the world's worst pedophile, even though there's Jimmy Savile and, these other people, and just shutting that shit down. And people should know now that, America is completely owned and controlled by Israel and other forces, and that, they don't give a shit about what you think or say. When the majority of people are, for those of you who've heard the voiceover, and you'll hear it again in a second. But it's so obvious now. A lot of people have had this theory and have talked about these things, but it's right in people's face. And the American people have no answer. So I'm going to put this at the end of this video. It's going to have all this stuff in it. This guy who was interviewed with Candace Owens and Norman Finkelstein. It was a Jewish guy whose parents were Holocaust survivors who was, talked about. He's done multiple books on Gaza and has been blackballed and all these other things. And so the reason that's relevant to what I'm saying here is that I had a dream last night, and it was an odd dream, and I've been having more vivid dreams lately. And in the dream, I was like, thought I was awake. And I was like, I got to remember all this, in the dream. And I can't remember much about what happened before that. But I was at one of these spiritual gatherings we used to have. And I have these dreams every once in a while where I'm at a spiritual gathering. And a lot of interesting things happen. And usually it involves some spiritual, something to do with gratefulness meditation or my own spiritual journey. And so I'm thinking in the dream, wow, I have to remember this dream. And then I'm thinking, they don't know anything. I was going to make this whole thing about sleep. And I think I still have the voiceover. I think I could recreate it. But they don't know what happens because I want to see if modern day allopathic medicine and science had any idea what happens in that moment where you're really sleepy, right? You're awake, that last moment before you go unconscious, right? And you're kind of in a dreamlike sleepy state. You're not, your brain waves have changed to the passive alpha waves or whatever happens when you go to sleep, and your eyes are heavy, and you're just about to, this thing where you go unconscious, because it's a weird thing. Sleep is a weird fucking thing because we have predators, right? Animals get eaten all the time and attacked in their sleep. It's the best time. If you're a predator, you would go after people in their sleep, and things can happen. All these pranks where people will draw a mustache or shave their roommate's head or draw a dick on their head face or something like. I mean, things can be done when you're sleeping, and you're just not in your body. Like for a good portion of your life, you're not. Your body's just laying there, and you're not in it, right? And you go to these other places, the etheric worlds, and so it's a weird thing. But this condition of, that moment between when you're awake, you're sleepy, but you're awake, and then when you go to sleep, when you have anesthesia, it's a weird thing because you're fully conscious, and there's like some kind of enzyme, chemical. I mean, the anesthesia is, whatever that is, it's some kind of chemical compound, but it knocks you out, like it makes you go unconscious. But in your system, you have melatonin, and you have, whatever that is in your system that you feel it, and you're like, oh, I got to go sleep. Like it's just there. The melatonin's a big part of it. I was thinking about how dreams are so weird, and I was like, science doesn't know anything about these dreams. Like I'm thinking this in my dream, right? I'm like, I got to remember this, and I like, science doesn't know anything about this. Like I was thinking about how science is clueless about, a third of our life, what happens to our, not just us, but other creatures that we can't stay awake all the time. We have to go to sleep. We have to reboot, and all the things that happen in sleep, and where you can get a fresh start. Like you can go to bed with a headache and wake up fine. You can go to sleep kind of angry or depressed and process it in your sleep, and you feel better in the morning. Like there's just things that like it resets you in some way, right? And you process things, and then there's this weird shit that happens in your dreams. And people try to explain dreams, and people who are study dreams and expert analysis, but you have to really be a spiritual person, someone who's on a higher spiritual level to really process and understand dreams. And you have to be willing to accept things in your dreams that are telling you something that you don't want to hear. It's a way for information to get through that it's undeniable. There was one time that Master Charji was implementing a, for the Sajmark meditation system. And he was not the master. Babaji was still alive. He was secretary of the mission, but he was running the whole mission. Babaji wasn't like a businessman or an organized person for that kind of thing. So he ran all the like business ends and all the trainings, and the preceptors were subpar. Like they weren't, this is all volunteer, so there's no paid positions. These are people with jobs and things. And, the mission hadn't really sort of caught on where people were getting it, like they weren't reading the literature and they didn't know, they weren't doing the sittings with any sort of understanding of how to do them. There was no preceptor trainings, and so the sittings were okay because divinity would come through them, but they were really participating, and they didn't know most of them were still talking about their religious training and not the differences. The Saj marked something completely new, and so he wanted to have these preceptors take tests. And Babaji was not like a disciplined person. Like, he was disciplined himself, but he wasn't a disciplinarian. And he later on his deathbed would say to Charji, he used to always say, only forbidden is forbidden. And people just took that and fucking ran with it. Like, he couldn't believe how, like, I don't want to say manipulative, but how, people, their egos took advantage of only forbidden is forbidden. Especially like the Europeans and the Americans who were, anti-religion, and they were hippies, well, sex, love, and rock and roll, kind of free love hippies. And they were using drugs and at gatherings, and all these things that are unthinkable, like when I was doing it. But they were drinking beer and they were partying and then doing the meditation, and and some of them were doing like LSD and having they were up in higher levels of spiritual, the spiritual, like the mind region, and the LSD was like really messing their spiritual condition up. And so Charji had to impose some discipline, which made everybody rebel against him. And while he was secretary of the mission, he wanted to have some standards for the preceptors, like you would have for a force of, like, if you had workers, you would set some basic understanding of the mission and things, which now is a part of it, but back then was still new, and whatever, and nobody wanted to do it, and they were all against it, and he was trying to force it. He was a little bit younger. Eventually it became a thing, but it wasn't right at the right time. And so, and maybe he was doing some other things. Maybe he was just annoyed with people, how people are, and so they were underperforming. And so he had this dream where Babaji handed him a picture of his dad, and the picture was folded over, so the top of his dad's head was the Charji's dad was folded, like you couldn't see the top of his head. And he realized that his dad in the dream, Charji's dad, handed him a picture of Babaji, and Babaji's head was folded. The picture was folded, so the top of Babaji's head was missing. And so Charji was now going to succeed Babaji. He was Babaji's representative, his spiritual representative, which is what the picture is. It's a representative of the master. And that the fact that his dad gave it to him meant it was about him, right? It would tied it to him. His dad's giving him this thing. That the representative of the master is acting unwise, right? So he realized he was, from the dream, that he was, he had to have more wisdom in what he was doing. So like that's a good like dream and interpretation of a dream, right? And so and in the Sajmark system, if you ever dream about a master, a spiritual person, it is that person. I've talked about the dream I've had with Jesus, and the reason that I started doing the Gratefulness meditation is in a dream like one of these gathering dreams, Charji remade me a preceptor, and it was a significant dream. And then I started doing the Gratefulness meditation. I go over that thing. So last night I'm dreaming, and somebody comes up to me at a gathering and says, my brother, who's my older brother, is mad at you if you don't stop telling people you're better than the whatever. They're gonna like attack you. Well, like there was this thing that happened with Norman Finkelstein, that he was talking about how, and I probably covered it in the video. I'm going to put this at the end of the video probably. But he was talking about how these kids who protest, Israeli lobbyists, Zionist lobbyists, were going to their homes, like their neighborhoods, and knocking on doors and telling all the neighbors that these kids who were anti-Israeli protesters at colleges were terrorists. They were going door to door and saying this kid's a terrorist in where the parents lived. I mean, that's like how bad that shit got. So it was, they're basically saying that what if we were going to have gatherings, that these people are going to show up and say that I sucked. And I was like, well, that, and my brother was, and I'm like, yeah, well, that's not, I don't care about that. I'm like, for one, we're not going to have gatherings, and two, like, you're going to look like fucking idiots, right? It's like silly. Like, it's just, it'll probably be like good for the thing, right? You know, like, and they wouldn't do that anyway because their whole thing is about ignoring and pretending that, you know, they don't want to acknowledge any of these things because they don't want to acknowledge how fucked up the things that they're doing in gratefulness meditation. But anyways, I've been having some, you know, the whole gratefulness meditation thing. You know, the thing about the reason that the gratefulness meditation is a part of this is because I had a series of dreams and experiences. You know, when it was obvious that Daji was failed master, you know, the transmission, the cleaning that is offered in the Sajmark system and the connection to divinity that it helps to enhance, it is like taking a supplement, you know, something nutritional that becomes essential for you. Like it's like for me, it's like breathing. Like it's a part. It needs to be. I have to have it in my life. It's essential. You know, I was such a low functioning person, really underachieving, really low functioning, and the Sajmark system just filled in those holes and, you know, helped me to be like a functioning person and be a competent person. Like I was an incompetent person. And so, like more than most people who do it, I am fully aware of, you know, the humbling experience it is. You know, I'm humbled by, you know, what I was before and what Sajmark meditation has helped me become as a person. Like I'm aware of it. Like, you know, it helps me, you know, there's no like, you know, arrogance there, like real deep arrogance, because I know that it's not me. Like, you know, when people praise God, like somebody makes a 3-pointer in basketball, like Steph Curry, and points to the heavens, or a football player, and people say, praise God, all glory to God. You know, that's good that people think that way. I'm not against that, but like I have it. Like I am very aware of, without my connection to God, I can barely function. Like it's just been a blessing for me. Like it's just there. Like I'm, you know, painfully aware of it. And, you know, if I don't talk about that much, but it's there personally. And I've said it, you know, in numerous places and times in these videos. And so I was, you know, when I realized that the mission sucked now, this whole heartfulness debacle, I was like, well, I'm not giving up the transmission and cleaning. Like, I'm not going to quit because they suck, right? Why should I quit? Because, you know, and I was saying things, and I was like saying things that no one else was willing to say. And there was this mounting, you know, Daji was watching my Journey series videos. I posted some on Facebook, which I don't regret, but, you know, I wouldn't do it again because I don't care about the, you know, it was like, you know, truther stuff, like where you're trying to wake people up or, you know, bring truth to something that, you know, it's when you, after it plays out, you're like, yeah, there's no way it was going to change anything, right? And so, you know, there I was persona non grata. There was people calling for my assassination and shit, and like India and all this stuff. Like there's, you know, there's a lot of people who were pissed off at what's going on with Daji, who was, you know, they were using me to, you know, because they couldn't go and say these things themselves and whatever. They were more underground and, you know, whatever. But I, you know, I was like, well, I'm not going to quit, even though, like, you know, I can't go to a gathering now. I can't, like, you know, I mean, it was bad, like, you know, and so it was a whole thing. But I was doing the sittings and I wasn't feeling anything. I didn't feel the transmission, any Daji sittings that he did on the fucking YouTubes. And they have an app, and they supposedly have preceptors giving sittings on the app, but I don't think that's even, I don't think it works. I don't think they have enough preceptors, or the preceptors don't really give the sittings, which was a huge problem before. That when Charji allowed some of the people to give long distance sittings, they wouldn't do it. The preceptor wouldn't do it, or the person wouldn't sit. Like some guy, when I moved from my first trip to India, I moved to New Mexico where there's no preceptors. And there's a senior full preceptor. The full preceptor is somebody who's they have a higher level of spiritual approach, and they were permitted to do these long distance sittings. And he said, "Well, I'll give you a sitting every Thursday morning at like 7 o'clock, like early in the morning." And so I sat for the first day, and I felt a sitting the first Thursday, and the next Thursday I didn't feel anything, and the Thursday after that I didn't feel anything. And so I called the guy, or I emailed him, or whatever I had in terms of communication. I don't even know if I had an email, so I must have called him. And I called him because we were talking, and I go, "So are we still doing those sittings?" They said, "Yeah, we're doing them." "What time is it again?" "What day and time?" I'm like, "Well, if you don't know, we're not doing like fucking. We think I'm a fucking stupid? Like you're not you're doing it, you fucking liar, right? You did it once and then you forgot all about it." And so either way, I felt there was no transmission coming. So now I'm kind of getting bummed because I'm like, maybe it's just over. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I fucking need it. And like, and I don't want to say I deserve it, but it's something where this stuff was, I didn't do anything wrong, right? I should still be able to receive this. And we were having one of the gatherings, online gatherings for the Heartfulness, and it was, the first Master Laoji's birthday. And my wife was late coming home from work, and I was doing the sittings with Daji, and I didn't feel anything. I'm like, this is just a waste of time. And I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden, I started feeling a sitting. Like, I just closed my eyes. I was watching TV or something. And it was like 6:30 at night or something like that. And it wasn't a time where Daji was doing the sittings. And so I just received this incredible sitting, like a regular one. And it was was outside of the Heartfulness cult of stupidity that they had created over there. And I was like, oh, I'm done with that. I'm done with the organization. And immediately my practice got better. And then I started doing Gratefulness meditation because other people were doing Heartfulness because they had found out about it because of me, and they were having similar, whatever. So now there's a Gratefulness meditation channel. But it's limited. Like, I don't have the organizational abilities. I'm not a master like the way that the masters are. Whatever spiritual evolution I have, whatever, I'm moving forward, but like I haven't been trained, I haven't been, given the proper spiritual whatever to be a master. I don't have the personality for it. I'm not an organizational person. And, it's just, there's so many holes in it compared to what we used to have. There's so many people, and there's so much in place. Charji was an incredible person at building an organization. He built the best and greatest volunteer organization ever. It had hundreds of thousands of people, and doing spiritual work, and then also, conducting these gatherings and organizational things. It was amazing. And like none of that exists anymore, and I can't recreate it. So, it's always been a thing for me. Like I'm limited, and there's no way to fill in those holes, right? And so I'm always concerned about it, but I've been thinking about it lately. Like it's just things have to grow and move forward, but there's no way to do it. And it seems like the people that are, a lot of them that are interested in pursuing it don't have personal resources. A lot of them are, I don't want to say maybe desperate, but not, people who aren't maybe a little bit lost and, would need be projects. They could be, they could get what I have got out of it, but they, people who are doing well in the world, it doesn't work out so well for them, especially Western people. In India, it's a little different. The Indians are, they have in their culture to have a spiritual life. Like there's this, this thread, there's this pathway of finding, an appropriate spiritual guru and having a spiritual life. In America, people don't have that. And people who are successful are always going to, they're going to put all their energy into that. And so, people who are competent in their physical and their material lives. And the Western people are always like lost hippies and, whatever it is. People who are outsiders, outcasts, people who seek spirituality. Usually people who don't fit in with society are struggling with society. So you can, at some point you have to be able to be a competent person. And you also have people who just kind of want to run away from life and things like that. So there's just isn't, there isn't some huge population of people that would be immediately able to take on responsibilities and, contribute in some way. And so I've been aware of that stuff. And, we can't recreate for people the the experience that I got that helped me, become a better person in the material world based on the Sajmark system, and also go to these gatherings and these these weekly group meditations and have individual sittings and these things, other than what we have in Gratefulness meditation. So I'm aware of there just isn't any path forward, and it's kind of a bummer, but there's nothing I can do about it. There isn't some reasonable path forward, and I've put out these ideas, and people who are interested in community, and it just the energy just went out of it almost immediately, and it was I could see it would just be kind of a burden for me, and I would be feeling resentful or whatever, or something that I don't have the energy and the wherewithal to take on. But so with all that, I had this dream where this person came up and said, my brother said that they're going to tell everybody I suck if we have gatherings or whatever, which I kind of laughed off and was like, in the dream. And then Master Chargy showed up, and I gave him a big hug. And, in real life that wouldn't happen because, I'm not a hugger, and he's, not supposed to hug people because of his spiritual energy. The masters are charged with this spiritual energy, and you have these spiritual points and things. And, so there's it just wouldn't happen. And, there wasn't some big exchange, but I think, in the dream I was really tired and worn out and overwhelmed. Like that was the thing. And then Chargy showed up, and I felt recharged. Like I just felt good. Like I've had a very intense and great summer, materially, but I can see that things are getting shitty quickly, right? Like this is, it's almost like the calm before the storm. My wife and I were talking about what a great year this has been materially, and we had a lot of great interactions and a wonderful time at our farm, and, a pig just showed up, and I had this couple of interactions with owls and things I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk about the owl thing at some point. I got a video of an owl that showed up and some other things, and like this, just almost like a dream like summer we had, a prolonged summer. Like it's just starting to get cold now, November, but it's still been nice, and like everything's in a flow, and we've had a just wonderful time, and I'm seeing the world collapse around us, like I said before, with the stuff with the the genocide in Palestine, and like these things there's consequences for that. Like America is completely owned, and and America's an evil empire that's now has a parasite running it, and it's like there's things that are going to happen, right? The rest of the world sees these things. It's a bad situation. Like it's there's going to be a divine intervention. There's always is, and there's this UFO thing that's happening out there, some kind of large object going. There's all this stuff, right? In the prophecies from the Whispers of Brighter World, there's going to be a big event sometime around, the 2026, the end of this year, the beginning of next year. It's all just like right there, and so. But just having that, Chargy show up in my dream and having this very extensive, I can't remember the whole thing, but it's a gathering. These gathering dreams. I'm just walking around and interacting with people, and there's these, I wish I remember it all, but I can't. But anyways, so I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, so like I said, there'll be no video on Wednesday. You get the whole idea. And so for those of you, I'm going to put this whole video in as the 129th edition of the Journey series. It's all going to go in there. Anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.